The man elegantly took the woman's hand in a snow-white glove to give her a tender kiss. The girl with amazing violet eyes blushed embarrassedly. She could no longer imagine her life without him. The guy was incredibly handsome, like a fairy tale prince straight from the pages of a fairy tale. Opening his eyes, he admitted that he was nervous about his new assignment, but her presence enveloped him in calm and filled him with confidence. Together, they headed into the distance along a snow-white corridor full of bright radiance, hoping that only a bright and happy future awaited them ahead. The door slowly opened and a blinding light streamed from behind it. The sacred maiden bowed before the emperor, who sat majestically on a throne in a room where luxury and gold shone everywhere. It was this lady who had the power to change the fate of the monster, cursed by the inexorable rain of sand. From the window, the meeting was secretly watched by two creatures, a wolf boy and a small rabbit. The healer will smile with warmth and confidence. Her magic will be aimed at healing and saving all magical creatures. An ordinary girl in casual clothes knelt softly in front of a dog cage, her faithful pet named Mahu. The dog had soft white fur, a black nose, and looked quite content, radiating calm and comfort. The freshman tenderly hugged the dog, holding it close to her as if it were her only family. Her name was Futaba Ichiru, and she was 25 years old. While talking to the dog, Ichiru complained to her faithful friend about the difficulties of the work she had to do to earn a living. To support his owner, the pet began to lick her nose, and this caused the girl to laugh joyfully. The next day, with a dejected expression on her face, the freshman listened to the instructions of her superiors, trying to cope with the next difficult task and find the strength to complete the work. Other employees were already hard at work on their computers, eager to complete their work before the deadline. On the boss's advice, Ichiru glanced at her colleagues and became even more upset. They looked far from cheerful. When the day off came, the freshman was lying on the bed, completely exhausted with a pain in her head. Every movement brought only discomfort. Approaching Mahu, the girl, with trembling in her heart, sought comfort in his presence, hoping to receive a sincere charge of tenderness and cheerfulness from the puppy. However, the dog, who should have woken up by now, lay motionless on the pillow, not making a sound. This made Ichiru fear for her pet's health, and she immediately began searching for the nearest veterinary clinic on the internet. Suddenly, the phone rang. The boss began demanding that Futaba come to work immediately due to the accumulated rubble. Awkwardly apologizing, the girl explained that she could not come to work because of a sick puppy. The answer she received was a severe reprimand from the boss. As if hearing his mistress, the dog woke up and sadly looked at her with his large eyes full of sadness. Not wanting to see its owner sad, the animal stood up on its paws and, taking hesitant but swift steps, ran up to her to console her. Immediately, hearing a bark on the phone, the boss started yelling at Ichiru, saying that she just wanted to take a day off, and the pet was in fact completely healthy. The boss did not allow her subordinate to get a word in, furiously accusing her of selfishness and declaring that she had no place on their team. Futaba had no choice but to come to work and leave the dog at home. Women's fingers quickly ran over the keys of the keyboard, typing the text of the message. She went home only late at night, thinking along the way about the possibility of changing her job to something else, more suitable and less stressful. In the darkness, when the night enveloped the world in a soft blanket, the girl carefully approached the cage where little Mahu was comfortably sleeping. But when Ichiru touched him, she felt that he was cold and not breathing. Large tears flowed from her eyes when Futaba realized that something was wrong with the puppy in the morning. Clutching her pet's body, she cried and called herself a fool, guilty of the death of her best friend. Suddenly, her legs buckled, and the girl fell to the floor, losing consciousness from overwork and stress. The body went limp, and sleep gently enveloped her, absorbing her into its deep and peaceful embrace. A beautiful girl with brown hair and violet eyes looked out of the open window in surprise. It seemed as if she had returned to her past life. The green dress fluttered in the wind as Ichiru tried to figure out who gave her this new chance at life. Now the former freshman was a nameless 15-year-old orphan. Although her character and personal traits remained the same, her appearance changed dramatically. In this world, there existed the Aroline Empire, a powerful country that rejected war and amazed with its majesty and inimitable grace. The tramp was picked up by a local orphanage, providing her with temporary housing and knowledge. However, when Ichiru turned 15, she was banished. A friend from the orphanage invited the orphan to go with her to a new place, but was refused. Ichiru strived to achieve everything herself, despite the fact that she could not accurately formulate her dream. In the big city, in addition to people, there were also magical creatures who had supernatural powers and knew how to use magic. People and magical creatures lived peacefully with each other, in complete harmony and understanding, communicating in the same language. A cute little animal with fluffy fur and a horn on its forehead, carrying a basket in its hands, went about its business and hummed a song. Suddenly, bright, glowing sand began to fall from the dark clouds in the sky, enveloping the earth in a strange rain. The frightened animals screamed in panic about the impending disaster. Afraid of becoming part of the sandy chaos, they rushed to find shelter. Quickly putting on his hood, the creature with the horn hurried away while saying how lucky people were in this regard. Ichiru, despite the rain that had begun, resolutely went into the forest to get the necessary herbs and flowers. As soon as a drop of rain touched the hand, it immediately spread, disappearing into the air. This strange substance had neither smell nor taste. The poor squirrel, trying to find shelter in the shade of a tree, could not resist and, squealing in fright, fell from the branch. Seeing this, the orphan rushed to the unfortunate animal, trying to catch it and save it from further disasters. A long time ago, at a shelter, children were crying, begging the professor to do something to help a cat whose fur had suddenly turned black. The cat quickly disappeared, leaving behind only a thin cloud of sand. Kneeling down next to the students, the teacher began to explain with a soft and sad intonation that because of the sand slowly falling from the sky, magical creatures live much less than people and are often forced to leave this world. The more sand the animal's fur absorbed, the less hope of salvation remained. The squirrel was almost in the hands of the girl standing below, but suddenly a strong wind rose and the small creature began to dissipate in the air, turning into light dust. The professor explained with a heavy sigh and deep regret that it was impossible to stop this terrible process of turning into sand. Barely holding back large tears, Ichiru remained standing, her arms extended forward. She was about to return home when her foot suddenly slipped off the edge of the ledge. The ground under our feet began to disappear rapidly. A loud, frightened cry, full of despair and horror, escaped from his mouth. Ichiru began to rapidly fall down. The wind whistled in her ears, and her heart beat wildly. When Futaba landed, there was something soft underneath her that resembled black wool. With surprise, the orphan realized that she was lying on a huge and terrible creature, a dragon with massive wings and powerful paws. Sensing something was wrong, the dragon opened his sparkling green eyes and stared at the violator of his personal space and peace. The girl's heart sank to her feet with fear. This huge creature could easily attack her and take her life with one movement. But instead of attacking, the huge beast only looked at her menacingly and ordered her to hurry up and leave the forest. Ichiru breathed a sigh of relief when she learned that the monster wasn't going to eat her. She felt sorry for him, since the monster's fur was like the color of the night, symbolizing loneliness and sadness. The terrible dragon took his last breaths. The little lady tried to get off him without causing any inconvenience. Wanting to somehow alleviate the suffering of the large creature, the girl began to gently stroke it. Women's hands gently slid over the rough, dark fur of the dragon. At the monster's questioning glance, Ichiru, excitedly and with a hint of despair, asked if he felt at least a little better. The question arose in my thoughts whether it was worth petting this monster the same way as a dog. However, how lonely it must have been for a strong dragon, feeling abandoned in the face of his inevitable death. Moreover, the image of little Mahu immediately appeared in my head, who, like this beast, was leaving the world completely alone. The huge reptile allowed Ichiru to continue his actions. It brought him hope and warmth. The girl hated herself for not being able to do more to help, when suddenly a rainbow light poured from her hand, blinding with its radiance. Frightened, Futaba jumped to the side, looking at her upper limbs in surprise. The orphan was full of confusion and fear, because nothing like this had ever happened to her before. Lazily, with a shadow of interest in his eyes, the black beast watched what was happening while the girl continued to hold her arms outstretched in front of her. The light became brighter, and suddenly black sand, flying off from the monster's fur, exploded in the air, heading straight towards the young lady's face. Immediately, she began to hastily shake off the unpleasant substance, trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible. It was noticeable that a gray spot had appeared in place of the monster's fur, which stood out sharply against the background of the rest of the black coating. And then the girl realized that all this time she had magic that could cleanse other creatures from sand. With this powerful gift, she could relieve them of this painful burden. The orphan was very glad that she had the opportunity to reverse the transformation of monsters into sand. Breathing heavily, the dragon looked questioningly at the girl and waited for an explanation of what had just happened and how it could affect him. With renewed effort, the girl focused again to activate her magic and completely heal the large reptile. It was hard, but she did it. The magic worked, and soon there was an explosion of black sand again. The dragon, noticing her efforts, sighed weakly and asked the baby to return home without wasting her strength on him. Instead of obeying the dragon, Futaba firmly stated that as soon as she completely healed him, she lightly. Finally, receiving approval from the great reptile, the girl smiled widely and sincerely. After another attempt, her previously flawlessly beautiful face was completely covered in dirt, grime, and dirt. But progress was obvious. Half of the dragon shone with an exquisite green light, glowing with health and vitality, while the other half was still black and shrouded in shadows. Her legs couldn't stand it anymore, and Ichiru suddenly collapsed to the ground with a dull, deafening thud. Images of her lovingly and tenderly hugging her pet began to appear before the lady's inner gaze. These memories now seemed empty and hypocritical to her. Extending her trembling hand forward, Futaba tried unsuccessfully to get rid of the oppressive feeling of guilt that tormented her heart because of Mahu. In her new appearance, Futaba continued to gently and lovingly hug the fluffy dog. Tears, sparkling in the light, began to roll down her cheeks, reflecting the bitterness of loss and deep affection for a faithful friend. In reality, the huge reptile was still lying motionless on the ground, its massive body stretched out on the cold ground. The orphan understood that all her efforts and labors would be in vain if she did not finish what she started and heal the monster. Every step was graceful and decisive. The shine of the boots, reflecting the light, created a subtle play of glare, shimmering and playing on the surface. Ichiru thought that perhaps she was still sleeping, and that when she woke up, everything would fall into place and return to normal. Placing her hands on the warm fur of the reptile, the girl began to treat it, focusing all her attention on this process. When the dragon regained consciousness, he was completely rid of the black sand, and his body regained its splendor. He could hardly believe that this was possible. His appearance again became green like an emerald. The girl who healed the monster was sleeping serenely, putting her cloak under her head. All her magical energy has dried up, taking away her strength. All dirty, she lay on the white sheets, thinking about whether the same thing happened to her in a past life, or whether everything was different. Using his powerful magic, the huge dragon carefully lifted the fragile man high into the air. The next moment, in the blink of an eye, the reptilian figure was transformed into a tall and charming guy. He carefully picked up the dozing girl in his arms. The words that the little girl had said earlier surfaced in the guy's head, that she would hug him as soon as she had completely removed all the black sand from her body. Turning his emerald eyes to the girl, the man, without waiting for an answer, thought out loud about whether all this was real and whether it corresponded to what she really wanted to do. Futaba lay on a soft bed, having been moved into a small, modest, but neatly furnished wooden room. The orphan woke up from a familiar voice that sounded loudly in the silence of the room. When the man was asked if he was the same dragon dying in the forest, he did not hesitate to immediately confirm it. An acquaintance occurred between them. It turned out that the reptile's name was Hisui, and in response, Ichiru, showing politeness, introduced herself and told about herself. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a brown rabbit appeared, greatly frightening the guest in the dragon's house. Kneeling down in front of the girl, he introduced himself as Fuka, the hair spirit. His soft voice and warm gaze created a feeling of tenderness and comfort. Hisui was dissatisfied with the unexpected appearance of the magical spirit, who, in turn, really wanted to see the girl who had been sleeping for so long and finally woke up. The animal watched as the man held Futaba carefully in his arms, and his attention was drawn to who she could be to him. As a threat, the werewolf threateningly told the rabbit that he would eat him if he accidentally gave out information to someone he shouldn't. The rabbit was quickly thrown out of the window so as not to irritate the owner of the estate, and the animal disappeared out of sight with a frightened squeal. When asked who the bunny was, Hisui replied with a grin that he was the main thorn in these places. Staring uncomfortably at her new clothes, Ichiru noticed that the items were clearly a size too big and probably belonged to a man. The healer's brown cloak hung on a chair next to a table in the center of the room, which also had a large window letting in soft light. It was known that dragons were sacred creatures, close to the gods, and possessed an incredible concentration of magical power, according to ancient legends. Hisui was a dragon, and given this, he met anyone with ill intentions with anger, being able to take their life with ease. It was important to Futaba that the magical monster was not only healthy, but also completely free of sand. Hearing the question of whether everything was okay with her, Ichiru barely held back her tears, and, trying not to reveal her true feelings, answered in the affirmative. The guy was in perfect health and clearly felt better without the black burden that had previously weighed on him. Leaning against the wall, the werewolf, studying it with interest, asked the girl if she had used healing magic. Hesitantly, the orphan agreed that she could heal others. Her voice trembled, and her facial expression betrayed internal doubts and self-doubt. Their conversation was interrupted by the rabbit, who suddenly appeared, shocked by the truth revealed. In this world, doctors were usually called pharmacists working in hospitals. In addition, their duties included examining patients and mixing medications. Healers in this world were wizards who had the ability to heal others using magic and spells to restore strength and health. Magical healing was considered the most powerful of all magical abilities, and was nearly impossible to master through training. The bunny happily stated that, as expected, Ichiru had this divine blessing and was special. Hisui's presence confirmed that her healing magic was truly powerful and unique. Taking the girl by the hands, the rabbit, with an enthusiastic expression on his face, announced that God had finally heard the prayers of magical creatures and sent them a new savior. At that moment, Futaba remembered other magical creatures that she could heal, and this gave her hope. Moreover, if the orphan can save them, she will become closer to them and will be able to hug them, tenderly stroke their soft fur, filling her life and the lives of the creatures with warmth and care. The girl's eyes opened wide at the prospect of spending her days with these cute creatures. Tired of listening to the bunny, Hisui grabbed him by the ears. However, the rabbit did not even think of stopping talking, insistently calling the dragon's house his property. Having gotten rid of the persistent pet, the werewolf again focused on his guest. His gaze took on a new focus and seriousness, reflecting deep concentration and determination. The monster asked Futaba not to listen to the hare, explaining that everything was far from being as simple as he described. Leaning towards the girl, the dragon expressed doubt that she had healing magic, pointing out the lack of evidence of this. However, the werewolf also remembered their agreement. Taking her hand, he stated that they could fulfill the deal right now. Pulling Ichiru closer to himself and feeling the warm breath of her body, Hisui gently reminded that she herself expressed the desire to hug him, creating an atmosphere of tenderness and mutual intimacy. Raising his hand, the dragon added that before losing consciousness, this was the lady's last wish, for the fulfillment of which the maiden paid with her life. His face took on an expression of submission, and the guy made it clear that he was ready to let her do whatever she wanted to him. Admired by the majesty of the large creature standing before her, Futaba's mouth dropped open in surprise. An awkward smile appeared on her face, as Ichiru realized that at that moment she had gone a little overboard with expressing her emotions, feeling slightly embarrassed and wanting to correct the situation. Without thinking twice and not wanting to miss such a good chance, the orphan rushed forward to hug the magical animal and press her nose into the soft fur. The animal's fur smelled pleasantly of young leaves and fresh greenery, and this aroma was so delightful that it was impossible to resist cuddling even closer. Moving away from the monster, Futaba, with slight sadness and a gentle smile, asked the guy to come to this place again someday, because she could not get enough of the communication and the feeling of his soft fur. Before completely releasing the girl, the dragon warned her that under no circumstances should she use magic after leaving the barrier. From the evil gaze of green and dangerous eyes, Ichiru shuddered, feeling an icy chill run down her spine, as if a harbinger of an impending threat. Threatening with his sharp fangs, Hisui sternly declared that it was necessary to remain silent about what happened to his body. The orphan became afraid from the sight of a sharp object pressed to her throat. Even with all her strength, she knew that she could not heal everyone who needed healing. Before removing his paw from her, Hisui scornfully called the girl's magic a deception and her a disappointment. Having transformed back into a human, he advised her with urgent seriousness never to get involved with such things. Night fell in the city, and shadows enveloped everything around. The deserted streets remained deserted, without meeting a single living soul. Returning to her room and sitting down on her bed, Ichiru discovered Fuku, who seemed immune to any tricks or deception. All this time, he watched the orphan from behind the thick bushes and noticed her strange and thoughtful expression on her face. To verify the presence of magical abilities, one had to go to the palace, where there was an expert who was able to analyze the properties and abilities of other people. The girl's face darkened when she learned that such a procedure was very expensive, not to mention the collection of an evaluation commission. However, in order for the healers to do their work, the Empire paid them a lot, providing them with a luxurious life. Wizards lived in expensive houses with gold furniture. Ichiru cast an incredulous glance at Fuku, as if not believing his empty stories and promises. There was a mixture of skepticism and wariness in her eyes. Turning to the rabbit, the orphan said that the animal knows a lot, but she needs it not to divulge their conversation to Hisui, keeping it completely secret. To the orphan's surprise, the animal agreed to keep the secret, but demanded in exchange to use her amazing magic. Fuku promised not to complain if the treatment failed, and assured that he would not reveal the secret powers, keeping them secret from outsiders. A memory surfaced of how the large reptile strongly advised against using healing on anyone. Magic was an invisible mystical substance that filled the world, known as an element. Manipulating and changing things using this particle was called magic. Wonderful spheres swirled around the strange sign. Using magic was impossible if you tried to summon an element that did not belong to you, or if you lacked strength. The girl quickly came to the conclusion that, in any case, everything depends on the power of imagination and the ability to perceive the world around her, realizing that our perception can shape reality. Deciding to test her strength, Ichiru focused her energy and sent a stream of magic in the form of rainbow sparks towards Fuku, who was sitting on her lap. Her efforts paid off. Sand slowly but surely began to fall off the rabbit's fur, gradually spreading throughout the room and forming a thin layer on the floor that raised clouds of fine dust. And then in a moment, the rabbit regained its original color, just as it was born. The fur of the beast shone with cleanliness and health. Happy Fuku jumped for joy. His body was filled with lightness, and a warm feeling like the rays of the sun gently enveloped him, bringing comfort. But when the bunny tried to thank Ichiru, she had already lost consciousness from exhaustion and fell exhausted on the bed. Having regained her strength a little, the orphan opened her eyes and said with a smile that everything was fine. The contented rabbit could not stop running around the room with joy. The monster did not believe that he could again return his native color and become the same as he was before. Amazed, the girl, being next to her new friend, came to the conclusion that she really had the abilities of a healer. But then, in the forest, the dragon expressed his disappointment about the guest's powers. Lying on the soft sheets, Ichiru could only hope to unleash her new power, waiting for the moment when her inner capabilities would manifest themselves and open up new horizons for her. Turning to face Fuku, Futaba quietly said that everything was fine. In the depths of her heart, she did not want her encounters with the strange creatures of this world to end. In the darkness, a tall man stood at the window, watching as the deadly sand poured down like rain, creating an ominous atmosphere filled with foreboding. It was Hisui who overheard his new acquaintance talking about her desire to learn more about magic and ability testing. Merciless magical sand rained down from the sky onto the deserted streets of the city. All the monsters had long since disappeared into their shelters, afraid of being caught in this terrible hail. On the table there were cookies decorated in the shape of cute rabbits, looking very appetizing, and next to the cookies there was aromatic tea floating. Over breakfast, Ichiru discussed with Fuku complaints about the evaluation commission, which charged too much for its services. The rabbit explained to her that he previously had no wealth and was not popular because of his sandy appearance. However, now everything will change. Taking a hot cup of aromatic drink in her palm, Futaba thoughtfully looked at the bunny and asked if there was a particle of magical creatures in his blood. Having not received an exact answer, Futaba took the knife in her hands and began to carefully spread the jam onto the toast. Nothing bad should happen if her knowledge of healing magic became more extensive in the library. Biting into her toast, Ichiru remembered her futile attempts to use magic on herself. The taste of the crusty bread soaked in jam was incredible. In the girl's hand was placed a golden earring with green scales that Fuku had given her, its shine and exquisite design reflecting deep symbolism. Placing his hands behind his head, the little bunny admitted a little embarrassedly that it was actually a gift from Hisui. Futaba listened carefully as the little bunny explained that now the orphan could safely move around the dragon's house using this decoration. Thoughtfully and very carefully, Futaba brought the jewel closer to her face to carefully examine the earring, studying every detail and enjoying its exquisite shine. Gold looked very beautiful on the girl's ear, harmoniously combining with her image. It not only gave it an elegant appearance, but also contained protective magic designed to protect its owner. Having explained everything that was necessary, Fuku quietly slipped out of the room and disappeared, leaving behind only a light touch of mystery. The girl was left alone, holding in her hands a beautiful accessory, which now became her property. Happy Ichiru put on her new dress and went for a walk. As she walked down the stairs, she felt the fabric of her dress flowing softly around her. In her thoughts, the orphan dreamed of brushing Hisui's green fur, imagining how he enjoyed this process and how her care brought him pleasure and peace. In the distance, at the door of a large house, stood two ladies. They discussed how good it would be to take custody of a new child, preferably with beautiful fur. Sensing something was wrong, Futaba decided to follow them. Their conversation and habits made her anxious with a premonition of impending troubles. Slowly opening the door into which two ladies entered, the girl shuddered in fear when faced with a blue, strange bear. The bear also studied her, putting his paw to his mouth in an expression of surprise, as if trying to comprehend what was happening and express his bewilderment at meeting the strange lady. However, having noticed an expensive earring on the client, the bear immediately changed his attitude to a more positive and friendly one. Inside was a blue room filled with wealth and luxury. People dressed in elegant clothes sat in comfortable and expensive chairs. Ichiru, unaware of what was happening around her, was also given a black mask designed to hide her face and provide anonymity in this mysterious and disturbing environment. In the woman's hand was a black card with the number 8 written in an elegant font. Those around them enthusiastically discussed that today promises to be full of fun and exciting events. Everyone was looking forward to amazing impressions and bright emotions. The host of the event wore a bear mask and blue robes. Having enthusiastically thanked everyone present for participating in the auction, the man proudly assured them that the dolls on display were real masterpieces. With surprise, Futaba assumed that she had ended up in the wrong place where dolls were sold. The curtain parted to reveal the stage where the wolf boy sat on the sofa. He was chained, with his eyes closed and a sweet, touching look. When the guy opened his eyes, everyone around him was shocked by their unusual yellow hue, reminiscent of bright amber, emitting a warm and mysterious glow. Even Ichiru could not resist the werewolf's charm and managed to hide her admiration for how good and handsome he was. But suddenly, the girl realized that something was wrong. The creature in front of her did not look like a doll. It seemed like a living creature. The boy sat on the sofa, showing off his sharp fangs, which he bared in response to the predatory exclamations and screams of the audience, as if preparing for an attack and emphasizing his terrifying nature. The behavior of the adult ladies in the hall did not change. They continued to sit there with grins on their faces, their hungry eyes never leaving the goods. The man, leaning on the armrest of the chair, looked most interested in what was happening. It was a shadow auction. The presenter continued to convincingly praise the wolf cub, describing his snow-white skin, undisturbed by sand, and the rare color of his fur. Ichiru shuddered in horror as she saw the aristocrat, with a vulgar smile on his face, blush with excitement. The girl was overcome with a feeling of horror when she realized that this boy was the target of an adult man with evil intentions, trying to buy him. The initial bid was 1 million gold. Soon the hands of the women sitting in the hall began to rise one after another, each of them offering increasingly higher amounts, not stinting with their money. However, the highest bid was made by aristocrat number 7, offering an impressive 3 million gold, which attracted everyone's attention and caused a wave of shock and delight in the room. Ichiru couldn't let that happen and, in a desperate attempt to prevent the purchase, quickly raised her hand, offering as much as 5 million. When silence reigned in the room, the girl began to reproach herself for such a stupid act, because she only had 1,000 gold pieces in her pocket. But the man was not at a loss and, raising his number up, placed a final bet of 10 million coins, which significantly exceeded the other offers. Opening her mouth in shock, Ichiru was unable to utter a word after hearing such an astronomical amount. So the item was sold and its new owner was Mr. Number 7, who seemed like he couldn't wait to pick up his new doll. Raising his hands, the presenter congratulated the wolf cub with satisfaction, announcing that he now had a new master. At the same time, his voice trembled with excitement and pride. However, instead of joy and happiness, the boy only contemptuously ordered those around him to be silent and demanded that he be returned back to the forest where his home was. The guy's speech was interrupted by a loud click, which suddenly rang out in the silence and made him freeze in fear, feeling his heart beat in his chest with inexpressible anxiety and expectation. The man in the bear mask said with satisfaction that, apparently, the wolf cub still remembered the sound of the switch on the collar and the consequences of pressing the button. The silver collar was equipped with a secret mechanism that released sand rain, which was not subject to magical protection and was terrifying to magical creatures. If you press the button located on the back of the collar, the injection needle is activated. Within a few minutes, the monster's body will be turned into dust and scattered in the wind. When the boy was caught, his faithful friend was with him, a little squirrel who was also chained in a collar and then disappeared into the sand. The shocked Ichiru could not move from the cruelty that the aristocrats showed, enjoying their superiority in this room. Leaning forward, she firmly decided that it was necessary to inform someone about what was happening and about the terrible plans of these people. But then, suddenly, a blue bear appeared in front of her and let her inside. He wanted her precious earring as payment. The girl could not give away the earring, since this accessory was important for her connection with the Hisui house. The refusal angered the bear, and he aggressively stared at her, ready for action. At this time, the aristocrat approached the poor boy and, with a sincere expression on his face, declared that now he would take care of him and love him with all his heart. Lifting the guy by the chin, the man was ready to provide the wolf cub with all the luxury and wealth he could offer. Over time, the master could even remove the collar from the doll when she is completely accustomed to life in the new estate, and her behavior becomes obedient enough to justify trust and freedom. Suddenly, the boy grabbed his new master's hand with his teeth, not hesitating to show his anger. His eyes sparkled with rage when he ordered the hand to be removed and called the rich man an old man. But instead of anger, the man only shuddered with laughter, trying to restrain himself. The nobleman was not going to tolerate such a riot from his goods and was determined to show that disobedience would not remain without consequences. Grabbing the wolf cub by the collar, the rich man without hesitation pressed the button located on the back of the silver collar, demonstrating his decision and inflexibility. At this time, Ichiru was fighting with the bear, but upon hearing the sound of a button being pressed, she turned around in shock so quickly that the black mask flew off her face. Experiencing excruciating pain, the doll suffered in the hands of its master, twitching from unpleasant stabbing sensations. Without giving the boy the slightest chance to escape, the aristocrat promised to let him go and end his suffering, only if he politely apologized and promised not to behave like that again. Sobbing and unable to stop his tears, the wolf cub finally gave in and wanted to start asking for forgiveness, but did not have time. A large blue toy bear's head was thrown at the nobleman, causing the man to drop from the werewolf's hands and stagger to the side. The host of the event was outraged by the behavior of the guest, which violated the atmosphere of the celebration, and began to express his dissatisfaction. But Ichiru's anger was even more obvious. With hatred in her eyes, she glared at the assembled nobles and, without hiding her emotions, loudly asked what the hell was happening here. She couldn't shake off the haunting words of Hisui, who strictly ordered her not to use her powers in front of others. However, the girl's heart literally broke at the sight of the poor wolf cub, who was trying with all his might to take off his bad collar. His desperate efforts and torment were too painful. Crying, he prayed to the people around him for forgiveness and salvation. The voice was interrupted by sobs, and the eyes were full of desperate hope for mercy. Futaba could not hold back her tears when she saw the wolf cub suffering, and quickly rushed forward, ready to do everything possible to help the poor creature. Reaching forward, she quickly pressed the button on the collar and, focusing her magical energy, began the healing process. The scales from which the accessory was made sparkled in the light of the sparks scattered throughout the space. A magical shield began to form around the girl and boy, which not only protected them from the touches of strangers, but also protected them from evil, creating an impenetrable barrier. The earring hanging on the ear fell down with a crash when the magic shield began its work. Those around could only watch in shock at the barrier in the form of a luminous hair, which did not allow them to get closer to the strange guest and her companion. Breathing heavily, Ichiru tried to regain her breath after the grueling fight and intense use of her powers. Every attempt to inhale seemed like an effort requiring enormous effort. The wolf cub opened his yellow eyes and stared questioningly at the collar, which no longer released sand onto the skin of the poor creature. The boy sadly pulled away from the girl's touch and warned her that everyone who touched the collar died because of the evil magic cast on it. The angry guests and men in blue bear costumes began to slowly but surely break the barrier created by Ichiru to destroy the magical barrier and get to them. Trying to break the iron chain, Futaba strained with all her might, but all her efforts were in vain. The wall slowly but gradually broke, and screams began to be heard from outside, calling to immediately grab this girl along with the doll. The sounds became louder, adding tension to the situation. Suddenly, the girl staggered and was suddenly caught by a familiar man in a long cloak who appeared behind her. Her savior was the faithful Hisui, who came at the most critical moment to protect Ichiru, showing amazing courage and devotion. Putting the girl on her feet next to the sofa, the dragon turned out to be truly real, and not just a figment of her imagination or a clouding of her mind. When a girl used magic in the city, Fuku created a magical shield to protect her. The reptile's task was to come to her aid live. But what interested Hisui most was the reason why Futaba began to cry big tears at that moment. The reason for her sadness was connected with the tragedy that happened to a boy who was kidnapped from a house in the forest and put up at an auction as a doll. Even in his sleep, the little werewolf could not calm down. He trembled all the time with fear and could not find peace, as if the shadows of horrors haunted the boy even in his deepest dreams. Upset and with her head down, Ichiru remembered that the boy was still very young in age, and this realization further increased her bitterness and sympathy. Suddenly, powerful hands grabbed the chain and tore the metal in half as if it were made of ordinary paper, demonstrating incredible strength and indomitable power. Hisui was incredibly strong to be able to break the chain binding the guy so easily. With this, he impressed his sweet companion. Deciding to hide the werewolf, the dragon wrapped his cloak around him, carefully masking the traces of the magical healing power and the absence of sand. The boy was carefully handed over to the orphan like a priceless treasure, surrounded by warmth and care, as if every movement was aimed at preserving his fragile safety. Hisui hugged the lady, who had experienced many trials that day, and tenderly said that he would take care of all the worries, promising to provide her with the peace and protection that she deserves. The men who had orchestrated the entire act watched in amazement as the barrier collapsed and soon noticed that a new member had joined them. The host, quickly clapping his hands, tried to attract the attention of the aristocrats and calm them down, worried that there might not be enough time to establish order. From the precious stones emerged huge golem bears whose sparkling forms gleamed ominously. They were given orders to deal with the strangers and drive them away. The head of the event explained that despite their diamond appearance, these golem bears were formidable enemies and could rival 4 platoons of knights. Thieves who dare to break the rules will face an inevitable sentence that will be inevitable and severe, as well as appropriate retribution. Suddenly, a gust of wind appeared in the room, and a figure in a cloak surrounded by a whirlwind said that everyone present in the hall was wrong. Hisui covered the girl's eyes with his hand to protect her from the horrors that were about to unfold in this room. The dragon's eyes shone with malice and hatred as he passed judgment on the arrogant aristocrats for their evil intentions. Ichiru felt herself losing consciousness. She could barely distinguish the howling of the wind and the blurry figures of monsters that flashed before her eyes. Everything that was happening seemed to her like a scene from a book she had recently read. Every detail and event resembled the pages of a work. Those who dared to come with malevolent intentions were subjected to their evil green gaze piercing through, and their lives were taken away without mercy. The three of them sat, completely deprived of strength, near the window through which the sun's rays streamed, filling the room with soft light. When Futaba came to her senses, she stood up abruptly and asked where they were. Hisui explained that he used teleportation. All the people who took part in the auction were arrested by the guards called by Fuku to ensure order and prevent any possible unrest. Awkwardly, the rabbit stood and embarrassedly accepted compliments from the officer, who, amazed, asked the question of how this small and fragile animal could defeat two large and powerful golems. The representative of order held a collar in his hand and looked in amazement at the invention created by the nobles, an instrument of torture with sand rain. Sitting on the floor next to the boy, Hisui said that he wanted to slightly correct the boy's memories. He explained that this was necessary because he had witnessed Ichiru's magical abilities and face. Lowering his arrogant gaze, the dragon also added that if the werewolf starts causing trouble, the reptile will devour the rest of the memory, as was done with the traitors of living beings. Surprised, the girl froze in place at the words about eating other people's memories. The worst part was that Futaba didn't remember the consequences of using her magic. As a result, she could be immediately imprisoned in chains and used as a tool for healing another commodity. Lowering her head, the orphan was horrified by what could happen. But despite the fear and anxiety, she still found the strength and courage to come up with a worthy excuse. The reason for using magic for healing was a boy who suffered greatly at the hands of cruel nobles who tormented him day and night, depriving the poor thing of hope of salvation. Coldly interrupting the little girl, Hisui stated that he warned her about the consequences of using magic, and despite his warnings, she still could not avoid problems. Ichiru broke out in a cold sweat when she saw the anger coming from the man. The face was distorted with rage, and the tension in the air became almost palpable. The girl bitterly realized her stupidity and, bowing her head, sincerely apologized for her rashness to the dragon. However, judging by his logic, it turns out that Ichiru also made a mistake the first time she cured him of the black sand. Pressing her hand to her chest, the orphan said that at that moment it would have been better if she had no strength at all, if she could not help in such a difficult situation. Jumping up from her seat, the girl firmly stated that she would never give up her point of view and would definitely undergo a magical examination. Futaba, unable to maintain her balance due to her awkwardness, began to fall backward. Her hands moved helplessly in the air, and her expression resembled a mixture of surprise and fear. The young man caught her gently, deftly catching her with his hands and not allowing her to fall. His reaction was quick and confident. The dragon sighed tiredly and called Ichiru a real child who acted stupidly and inexperienced. Sitting in the room, the rabbit told the girl that when Hisui began to go on a rampage, he could never stop himself. The rabbit winked at his interlocutor and, with a playful sparkle in his eyes, said that the large reptile probably cared about her very much. The orphan was embarrassed to hear that she was called a weak girl who desperately risked her own life to save the dragon. After some time, Hisui invited her to live together if she was going to continue not to appreciate her gift and act stupidly. If she decides to do something again, the orphan will need a person who can get her out of trouble. The dragon was ready to take drastic measures. Oddly enough, an image of a man appeared in my memory, talking about the possibility of absorbing someone's memory without any problems. With his hands folded on his chest, the owner of the house patiently waited for his companion in the open air. His gaze was directed into the distance, and a light breeze played with his clothes, creating a feeling of peace and confidence. Ichiru stood opposite him, accepting the invitation to live together, realizing that this decision would free her from spending on rent, groceries, and other expenses, allowing her to focus on accumulating capital. Unforcedly, with a slight smile on his lips, the guy asked if she was afraid to go to the dragon's lair. It would be a lie to say that the terrible beast did not inspire terror. His incredible wings, sparkling green eyes, and sharp fangs caused trembling and awe. However, as a person, Hisui was a surprisingly sweet and calm guy who exuded warmth and caring. The orphan smiled sweetly, her eyes sparkled with sincerity. The lady said that everything was fine and didn't mind at all. Her voice sounded soft and soothing. Another of her arguments was that the beast was incredibly soft and fluffy, which could melt even the coldest heart and cause an indescribable feeling of tenderness. Out of the corner of his eye, the owner of the house noticed that she had rather unusual tastes and preferences for a young lady. With a snap of his fingers, the tenant hit the orphan on the forehead, attracting her attention. The unexpected gesture was both sharp and playful. Thus, he cast a spell on her, and then raised his leg in the air and, as if dancing, walked through the invisible shield that veiled his movement. An outstretched hand, slightly curved in an inviting gesture, invited the guest to go with her to a new home and refuge. The girl's palm was also extended to the man, gently touching his hand and thus expressing her deep trust and readiness to accept the offer. The magical beast's estate was huge and magnificent, completely reflecting its majesty. The architecture and decoration, exquisite and finely thought out, created an atmosphere of subtle grandeur. Soon the delicious tea was served, and Ichiru and Hisui sat comfortably in the kitchen, discussing house rules to follow. The guy suggested that she consider this scarf a symbol of his accidental salvation, which led the orphan to an awkward and slightly embarrassed position. To begin with, the girl should have known that the Alan Empire had won a war of conquest 10 years ago. This information was key to understanding the current state of affairs and context. Quietly, the girl nodded and admitted that she already knew about it. Her agreement was filled with calm and confident understanding. The war ended when the children from the orphanage were only 5 years old. The town of Prui in which they lived was not involved in the fighting, and no consequences of the brutality were felt in its surroundings. Ichiru suddenly froze when she learned that during the fighting, the dragon was under the command of the imperial palace and directly under the leadership of His Majesty. Also, during the conflict, there was a court healer in the castle, who soon had to join the army as a military medic. The healer was valued extremely highly, as his unique magic was certainly irreplaceable, and no one else had similar abilities. However, during one of the fierce battles, the magician, having exhausted his strength to the last drop, fell from exhaustion, unable to withstand the pressure of the enemies and exhaustion. Futaba hastened to object to the interlocutor, recalling that now peaceful times have come, in contrast to the turbulent and conflict periods of the past. The dragon's memories retain a vivid image of Hisui standing in the mud and patiently listening to accusations against him related to Malu's death. His fellow fighter lay in bed, recovering his strength and venting his irritation at not being allowed to simply turn into sand to avoid suffering. When asked what was wrong with the tea, the girl nervously replied that everything was fine, although she could not taste it after the cruel story. The guy calmly continued to drink tea, as if nothing had happened. His calm demeanor contrasted with the tense atmosphere. The girl's room was not very large in size, but it was amazingly clean and comfortable. There was everything that could be useful: a bed, a table with a chair, a chest of drawers for storing things, and windows, through which the warm rays of the sun penetrated. Fascinated, Futaba could not believe her happiness at her new home, enjoying every corner. Before leaving, Hisui said that she could freely use everything in the room, and if any questions or concerns arose, she could always turn to him for help. The girl was immensely glad that the dragon finally recognized her magic and stopped calling it strange magic. Remembering the gloomy stories about the high mortality rate of healers, the orphan shuddered with fear and horror, feeling cold goosebumps running down her spine. Fuka said that healers, not tied to hospitals, were free to travel, working as freelancers. They could move from one city to another, offering their services to those who needed them. In addition, when asked about the boy they saved, the dragon said that he had started a new life in a secluded forest located nearby. For Ichiru, this was a real relief, as knowing that the boy they saved had found peace in the quiet forest brought closure to her worries. But then Hisui suddenly, and with disappointment, destroyed her hopes of meeting the werewolf, saying that it would not be possible to organize such a meeting. Mahu's memories recalled warm moments spent with his owner, whom he truly loved. This memory was filled with joy and tenderness. Every moment was like a precious gift. The werewolf woke up from his sleep when the squirrel, his faithful friend and companion, gently woke him up to rid him of the painful nightmare that disturbed his night's peace. They hastily found shelter in a deep cave to hide from the inexorable sand rain that poured from the sky like an ominous storm seeking to bury all living things under layers of fine, cutting sand. In response to the words about how lonely the boy was, The little squirrel suggested going to the city where other people and magical creatures live to find new friends. The monster thought about his friend's words. His face softened and a hint of embarrassment appeared in his eyes. Unfortunately, as soon as they arrived in the city, they were immediately caught, collared, and deprived of their freedom, leaving them in complete hopelessness. Remembering the terrible events that happened to him, the wolf cub sat on a hillock, burying his face in his knees, trembling with fear. Suddenly, thanks to his keen hearing, the boy's ear twitched from a strange sound that he heard in the distance. Raising his head, the werewolf saw two guests, a girl and a guy who were heading towards the forest dweller. Ichiru, trying not to scare the baby even more, carefully greeted him in a soft and soothing voice. Recognizing in the stranger the same girl from the cruel aristocrats who was sitting at the auction, the boy gets on all fours and, growling threateningly, took a fighting stance, as if preparing to defend himself. Covering the girl with his cloak, the dragon declared that if the boy even came close and dared to touch her, he would not stay away. Standing in the corner of the room, Hisui, with a slight note of sadness in his voice, explained to the girl that the werewolf had lost his memory and now did not remember who she was to him. The aggressive boy, pointing his finger at Futaba, claimed that all aristocrats, including her, could harm him. The orphan staggered back, her eyes wide in shock as she realized it was all true. Despair and horror appeared inside. The upset girl looked down. That moment when the collector boy, with a greedy gleam in his eyes, approached her, trying to buy the doll, Ichiru intervened, deciding to stop the scoundrel. At this moment, the lady became very similar to the owner of Mahu, who also tried in every possible way to protect her pet. The girl apologized for not being able to completely prevent the disaster and save the boy. Tears began to appear in her eyes like pearls, reminding her of her sincere regret. The boy, filled with anger, ordered her not to cry, claiming that shedding tears was a vile thing. Sitting at the table in a cozy corner, Ichiru, immersed in reading a book, slowly and carefully flipped through the pages, taking her time as if listening to every word and imbued with the depth of the text. A shiver ran through the lady's body when suddenly a wind appeared in the room, filling her atmosphere with an inexplicable and sharp cold. Holding a warm blanket in his hands, Hisui suddenly appeared in the apartment and alarmingly reported that mysterious ice sparrows had begun to appear in the forest, as if frozen by the spirit of winter. When the lady questioned who they were, the dragon explained that they were avian ice spirits, harmless and fickle creatures that fly from one place to another. With good nature and care, the werewolf handed Ichiru soft blankets, knowing that it would be frosty at night, and it was important to insulate himself in order to maintain warmth and comfort. The huge reptile rarely took the form of a dragon, since with such a body it was difficult to hide from the sandy rain in everyday life, and it became a real burden. Putting his hand to his chest, the man noticed that Futaba seemed to really enjoy touching his green fur. Confusedly shifting from foot to foot, the orphan did not know where to put herself and what to do in this situation. Putting his hand on the girl's head, the guy began to gently stroke her, showing reciprocal affection and trying to calm her down. Deftly maneuvering, the wolf cub ran away from the birds of cold, which seemed to be chasing him, not wanting to be left behind and trying to catch up with the little fugitive. The fact was that the sparrows just wanted to play with him, and the boy considered their attempts stupid and inappropriate. Finally, one of the white birds grabbed the werewolf and, using all its weight, pinned him to the ground, like fate accomplished with effort and determination. Tired of his own unsuccessful attempts to free himself, the boy stopped, and feeling the onset of cold, slowly began to fall asleep. The dog was dozing peacefully on its soft bed, experiencing a strange sensation, unable to move from unknown excitement. The dog knew that if he didn't pretend and hide his feelings, the owner would be upset about it and would be sad. Therefore, Mahu, without hesitation, barked loudly and gave a sign that everything was in order, hoping in this way to deceive his owner until the evening. With sleepy eyes looking into the distance, the wolf cub woke up from the dream that was haunting him, which did not want to stop and continued to torment him. He was not the same dog named Mahu, but he was still eager to meet the owner who cared for her pet with such reverence and love. Dressing in warm clothes and holding a torch in her hand, Ichiru quickly ran through the forest, trying not to miss a single sign in the silence of the night. With determination, she charged at the sparrows, waving her torch, and tried to scare them away from the werewolf, using the flames as a shield to protect him and prevent further threats. The birds, frightened by the scary lady with the fire, quickly rushed to run away, trying to hide from her rage and dangerous flame. Futaba walked towards the boy, worried about how frost had covered his entire body and afraid that it might cause injury to him. The boy, perceiving the lady from the auction as a potentially dangerous aristocrat, screamed in fear, begging him not to take a step closer to him. Ichiru nevertheless approached the guy, but not to attack, but to cover him with a warm blanket, since it was a cold night, and invite him to spend the night in the estate. Affectionately, the orphan told how she received permission from Hisui to bring a guest to their house, where comfort and warmth awaited the wolf cub, warmed by a warm stove. And again, the image of the owner of Mahu appeared in my head, who, apologizing for the delay, smiled at her pet with a caring expression on her face. Ichiru herself also invited him to go together, accompanying her proposal in a friendly tone. For some reason, the werewolf's acquaintance strongly resembled the girl from the dream, creating a feeling of mysterious déjà vu and an uncertain connection. Night fell, and autumn was buried in shadow, illuminated only by twinkling stars, creating a mysterious and calm glow in the darkness. The fireplace gently warmed the people inside, giving them what they needed on a cold night, light and warmth. Ichiru politely offered her guests the opportunity to rest on the bed, while she herself readily resigned herself to taking a nap on the floor. Having received a refusal, Futaba, before completely falling asleep, said that if the boy needed anything, he could safely contact her at any time. Soon the lady dozed off on the floor, and the boy, sitting motionless and immersed in his thoughts, thoughtfully watched the flickering fireplace lights. Unable to sleep due to restlessness and insomnia, glancing out of the corner of his eye at the lady of the house, the boy was full of surprise and bewilderment, wondering how a comparison could be made between the real woman and that idealized maiden from the dream. Then, in the clearing, the dragon said that all those who had hurt the boy had suffered a well-deserved punishment, and now justice has been restored. The wolf cub did not want to stop, and was determined to take revenge on his offenders at the next meeting for the death of his friend. The wise older magical beast tried to convince the younger one that by taking revenge, he would not experience true relief, and that revenge would only deepen his inner suffering. Looking at the sleeping Ichiru, the boy could already guess that she was different from the other nobles at the auction. It wasn't hard to do. Bending over the sleeping girl, the wolf cub decided to bite her, hoping that this would bring relief and help get rid of the hatred that was tearing apart the fragile soul. Suddenly, Futaba placed her hand on the werewolf's soft fur and began to gently stroke the boy. Feeling that something fluffy was pressed against her, she immediately pulled the boy into her arms and under the blanket to protect him from the cold. The wolf cub, diligently trying to escape from the strong and unforgiving embrace, discovered that all his efforts were futile and ineffective. The boy stopped when the girl received a charge of tenderness, feeling her heart fill with something heavy, plunging her into a fog of melancholy. Having accidentally compared reality with a dream, the werewolf was embarrassed by familiar words that suddenly reminded him of something distant and forgotten. The master and Mahu existed only in the world of dreams, where their existence could not intersect with reality, remaining solely a figment of the imagination. But all attempts to refer to the dream stopped the moment Ichiru whispered the name of her pet from a past life. Tears appeared in the werewolf's eyes when he finally realized that his beloved mistress was standing in front of him. Sitting by the window in the twilight, the boy fought with himself, immersed in confusion, where illusions intertwined with reality, creating unbearable confusion. The werewolf quickly came to the conclusion that he was the same Mahu who died in the past and was born again to meet again with those who were dear to him. Pressing his face against the warm hand of his hostess, Mahu felt relief and a significant improvement in his well-being, as if he had found long-lost happiness. Ichiru woke up and discovered that she was not alone. She had a guest of the estate at her side who unexpectedly appeared nearby. At breakfast, the wolf cub again found himself next to her, not wanting to leave the girl a single step, as if tied by an invisible thread that connects him to her, and only rare glances, full of devotion and trust, reminded of the deep connection between them. Annoyed by this behavior, Hisui ordered the boy to sit next to him rather than on his companion's lap to avoid further discomfort. To this, Mahu declared that he would never lose what was dear to him, and turning to face the mistress, said that his name is what he proudly carries with him. With the most honest look, the werewolf said that his name was Shitori, deciding to hide his real name and keep the secret of his true nature. The lady quickly agreed to call her new friend Shitori, offering no resistance and accepting the boy's choice. A joyful smile appeared on her face after the guy apologized for his rudeness. In that world, Mahu could not stand his weakness and the fact that he was a heavy burden for his mistress, unable to do anything in his guise as a dog. Grabbing the omelet with his fangs, the werewolf felt that in his new life he could do more to protect Ichiru and be more useful than before. Quietly watching, the boy followed the conversation between the dragon and the maiden, who happily discussed the upcoming day and their plans for the day. The magical beast was confronted about the use of cutlery and was promised a serious conversation with him a little later. Futaba was already impatiently waiting for the boy in her room when he returned after a long and important conversation with Hisui, ready to discuss what had accumulated during this time. Sitting down on the sofa, Shitori explained that the owner of the estate demanded several obligations from him, and only after fulfilling these conditions gave permission to live in the house. Covering himself to hide his embarrassment, the wolf cub timidly asked if Hisui liked Ichiru, jealous and observing their closeness. The girl, seeing how nice it was from Mahu, promised that everything would be fine, assuring that the three of them could always be together. But there was no need to worry. Futaba could not understand where such drastic changes in the werewolf came from, but despite this, she was also sincerely happy about these changes. Having met with the caring mistress of the estate, Fuku inquired about her well-being and found out how things were going with her childbirth and Hisui's condition. The real reason for the girl's visit to the rabbit was her new request, to remove sand from the animal's fur, which again stuck to its fur, giving it an unpresentable appearance. The bitter truth suddenly dawned on Ichiru as he realized that the sand rains were not going to stop and would continue to rain down on their world. Hearing a quiet knock on the door, the dragon carefully opened it and met his gaze with his guest, who stood in front of him like a bright fragment from a dream. Having overcome his self-confidence, the magical monster Futaba eagerly began to wonder if new sand had stuck to him. The Virgo, watching the green reptile, involuntarily approached it, experiencing curiosity and a desire to learn more about the mysterious nature. Brushing her hair away from her forehead, Muchia gently touched and pressed her face to Ichiru's, feeling their breath merge into one. Having made sure that everything was in order in front, the girl walked around the monster on the other side and began checking its back, carefully examining every detail. Thinking that the orphan wanted to examine the shirtless body, Hisui removed his outer clothing to provide better access for the girl. The back was as clean as the front, with no traces of sand to disturb the perfect cleanliness. Embarrassed, the lady froze in place, feeling the heat running down her cheeks and turning them pink. Accidentally, unable to resist, she burst out with a compliment about how beautiful the dragon was, and feeling awkward, immediately began to reproach herself for inappropriate words. When the man started to move in that direction, about to take off his pants, Ichiru screamed in panic that he shouldn't do that. In a fit of excitement, the baby accidentally tripped and began to fall. The bare-chested dragon instantly caught her with his powerful and tenacious hands, showing incredible strength and dexterity. Approaching the woman's ruby-red ear, he gently whispered that she needed to calm down and collect her thoughts in order to find inner peace. Sitting on the couch with Shitori, the girl tried to calm her racing heart in order to restore inner peace. And then a sad realization came. She should have checked the guy's dragon form, not his human one. At this time, Hisui stood alone, with his shirt unbuttoned, and looked at his skin covered with black sand, which was hidden from prying eyes. His subjects ran up to the lord, concerned about his condition as he leaned against the wall in an attempt to maintain his balance. Instead of calming down, Hisui threateningly asked if they considered him a mediocre creature who could fall over such a trifle, and ordered them to disappear from his sight. The syringe contained a mysterious green liquid, which, despite the complete darkness around, emitted a soft, mystical glow. Leaning on his stance and relying on his last strength, the Lord was ready to make any sacrifice in order to preserve the victory he had won and minimize losses. He grabbed his head when suddenly an unbearable pain arose, capable of not only disturbing his peace, but also driving him crazy, plunging him into a fog of torment. Using magic, the dragon created potions, using his ancient knowledge and mystical powers to create magical mixtures with unique properties. Sitting on the bed, Hisui looked at his black hands while harsh words and ridicule were heard behind him, causing inner turmoil. Ichiru suddenly stopped in her tracks when her attention was caught by something unusual and intriguing, flashing in the depths of the forest, like a mysterious sign. She was in this place for the first time, but already intuitively felt that the roses should have bloomed and not withered, as was happening now. Taking them home with her, Futaba pulled out the reference book and discovered that these flowers were not ordinary, but magical, which greatly expanded their mysterious nature. Deciding to try her magic on these flowers, the girl raised her hand, from which sparkling light was already emanating, ready to reveal the secrets of magical plants. Rainbow light meant a symbol of the divine in this country and was an extremely rare phenomenon, occurring only in the most special circumstances. Sitting at the table in her room, Ichiru gradually explored the boundaries of her magic, immersing herself in studying and understanding its capabilities. And then, after a few moments of persistent effort, her efforts were rewarded. The roses bloomed again and filled the air with a pleasant aroma. Covering her mouth in amazement at the beauty of the plants, Futaba began to think about what to do with them. It was worth taking them to a pharmacy and selling them to benefit from their rare properties. The pharmacist was also pleasantly surprised to see the excellent condition of the flowers, which were difficult to preserve due to sandy rains. Having learned that the plants were collected in remote parts of the Holy Land, the woman recoiled in horror, shocked by what she saw and unable to believe what was happening. Ichiru could not understand what was so strange about this until it was explained to her that there were many monsters living in the holy territory, ready to attack. The image of Hisui immediately came to mind, allowing her to take as much local herbs as she wanted, and which was completely different from the terrible monster. There was a potion called Rosette, which was made using rare misty roses that grow only in the magical corners of the holy forest. Rosette was a magical dye for magical creatures that could temporarily change the color of fur or hair, and was also the best remedy for removing black sand from a beast's body, although its price was quite high. The shop owner thought a little and realized that creating this potion required special skill and rare ingredients. Just as she began to think about this, her thoughts were interrupted by the appearance of a new client whose pink dress flowed across the floor, attracting everyone's attention with her elegant and mesmerizing appearance. A lovely lady with white hair and pink eyes, clearly an aristocrat, came inside and came for more Rosette. Ichiru couldn't take her eyes off the enchanting Lady Annie, who looked stunning and ravishing, like the epitome of sophisticated style and sophisticated elegance. The upset lady sighed when she learned that the potion was not in stock, and it would have taken a couple of days to prepare it, since the flowers had only recently arrived at the store. Lady Anne was well aware of the side effects of frequent use of Rosette, but this did not stop her and did not prevent her from continuing to use this potion. Suddenly, spider legs grew from under her dress, and the lady screamed loudly, expressing her indignation, since with such a terrible body she could not meet her beloved. Approaching the trembling Ichiru, Aine asked if she had frightened her with her sudden and unusual transformation. Covering her face with her hand, the maiden looked at her terrible appearance, covered with black sand, and hopefully dreamed of becoming beautiful again thanks to Rosette's potion. Anger and panic overwhelmed the sweet lady, and her fear of becoming an ugly spider caused her to frantically wave her legs in a disordered hysteria. She was saved from the sharp paws by a tall man in a classic suit and a monocle over one eye, who showed courage and determination at a critical moment. Holding Miss Aine's hand, the guy advised her to remain calm and carefully monitor her behavior if she wanted to remain lovely. Finally releasing her, the gentleman smiled sweetly and added that it was easy to disappoint his chosen one with his frivolity. The spider apologized to Lord Lead and Ichiru for her inability to control her emotions when angry. The man turned to the pharmacist, handing her a piece of paper with a prescription for a potion that he needed to purchase. Left alone while the healer went to look for a potion, Lord Lead coughed to the side, trying to restrain himself and not attract too much attention. Carefully examining her new acquaintance, Futaba noticed all the signs that the young guy was struck by black sand. When Lead, suddenly weakened and staggering from weakness in his legs, began to lose his balance, the girl immediately rushed to his side to support him and prevent him from falling. Bowing his head in humility, the gentleman, with sincere regret, asked the dear lady's forgiveness for causing trouble. Looking at this sweet conversation with a displeased look, Aine called Lead a real ladies' man. which caused him to start coughing even more in embarrassment. Futaba was completely delighted and incredibly surprised when, as a generous reward for her beautiful roses, she was given a large bag of money. Enchanted, the girl looked at the clearing covered with many wilted flowers, realizing that this was her chance to make money on a magical assessment that could change fate. On the table was a cup of aromatic tea, to which the Rosetta potion was added, which gives the color a magical effect. Sitting at the table in a snow-white dress and with radiant skin, Lady Ain noticed that an unusual lightness arose in her body, which she had never experienced before. The shop owner gratefully accepted the bag of flowers from Ichiru, asking if he had accidentally visited the Holy Lands to verify the authenticity of his gift. Having convinced the shop owner that he had not visited the Holy Lands and thus had not violated any regulations, Futaba was pleased to receive his well-deserved reward in the form of cash. In amazement, Shitori watched the beautiful roses that bloomed and exuded a wonderful aroma thanks to the lady's generous gift. Laughing at the wolf cub's careless words, Futaba reminded him with a slight grin that no one should find out about her secret power, so that the lady could keep this secret completely safe and avoid unnecessary attention. Putting a finger to her lips, Ichiru also added that Hisui shouldn't have known about the girl's flowers and business. Hearing that this must remain a secret from her husband and his mistress, the werewolf became lost in thought, carefully considering how much this proposal could affect the current situation. An image appeared in the beast's mind in which he was the winner, and the evil dragon was the loser in the battle for the girl's attention, which gave him a feeling of pride and satisfaction. Satisfied, Shitori threw himself into Ichiru's arms while vowing to keep her secret and not reveal her secrets to anyone. The magical creatures were actively discussing the new potion, which colored the mane much better than Roslet's old one, admiring the improved properties and effect. A cat with a dark color and matted fur also wanted to try a new product if it did not carry any risks and would not cause harm. Shocked by the influx of customers, the store owner stood and listened to their requests, which related to the purchase of a new potion in various volumes and quantities. Smiling sheepishly, she politely asked all the customers to wait a few seconds so she could organize and prepare new shampoo for everyone. Ichiru stood listening intently to the detailed story of how, with her help, Roslet had become the best and most sought-after medicine in their empire. She was pleased to hear praise addressed to her, realizing how her efforts and work were appreciated and recognized. A huge and fluffy cat greeted new customers when entering his cafe with grace and a friendly smile. Going by the level of definition of fluffiness, this monster received approval from Futaba for the incredible softness of its fur, which was highly appreciated. Even in this cozy place, where the girl came to enjoy a cup of tea, everyone around was just discussing a new potion that could work real miracles. 3 bunnies sitting at a nearby table cheerfully grabbed each other's delicate bangs and fluffy hair, creating a fun and lively atmosphere. The orphan covered her mouth with her hand when she heard visitors calling her herbs healing, and herself a holy virgin, surprised and embarrassed by such an unexpected confession. The big cat, with grace and comfort, served a cup of aromatic tea to the new guest of the establishment, who settled down at the bar counter not far from the kitchen. This man turned out to be Lord Lead, who incredulously studied a new cup of tea, doubting its healing properties. His gaze was full of caution and skepticism. With his eyes downcast and doubtful of the positive feedback, he became pensive in his thoughts, pondering possible hidden aspects and his own experiences. Pleased with the results of her magic, Futaba could not help but smile when she saw the graceful and fluffy creatures with pleasant-to-touch fur, which aroused her sincere admiration. She wanted to undergo a medical examination and assessment as soon as possible, so that she could become the healer of the Empire and bring healing to all monsters, ensuring their health and well-being. The shop owner told Ichiru that an investigator and a pharmacist from the palace recently came into her shop, who were interested in buying magical roses and were willing to pay well for them. Unfortunately, the scent of the flowers slowly faded, and the magical creatures began to return to their normal black coat color, remaining prepared to wait years for a new potion. Noticing his housemate's strangely good mood, Hisui wanted to find out the reason for this change and understand what could have caused such a joyful state. Bending over Ichiru with a request for attention, the guy asked for a minute to discuss an important and urgent matter that required her participation and attention. With his hands folded across his chest, the sage asked the orphan if she wanted to tell him something important or share her thoughts. In response to a negative answer, the dragon, holding back his displeasure, picked up the rose that he took from Fuku and grabbed the rabbit by the ears, interrogating him to find out where he could get this mysterious plant from. Not wanting to admit her guilt, the girl strongly denied the accusations and said that she did not use magic on the roses, insisting on her innocence. The cold gaze of green eyes radiated distrust and anger, betraying internal irritation from lies and insincerity. Hisui already knew that she was lying to him and healing flowers at her discretion, so he decided to punish her by making a rule that she would have to give half of her earnings to the healer. Expecting a worse punishment, the lady was pleasantly surprised to learn that she would only have to hand over the money without losing her memory or facing more serious consequences. From now on, the orphan had to discuss such issues with the dragon without exception, following the established rules and avoiding independent decisions. Placing his hand on the maiden's head, the werewolf asked her not to hide anything from him anymore and gave her a rose as a gift. After the conversation, putting on a warm cape, Ichiru headed into the forest to carry out her business and deal with the necessary tasks. Once she was in the forest, her attention was caught by an unexpected voice coming from the side, which aroused her curiosity. There, tangled in her dark fur coat and hanging from a branch, was Lady Aine, in desperate need of outside help and rescue. Justifying herself, the lady explained that her dark fur coat was firmly stuck to the web, and she could not get out of this difficult situation on her own. Recognizing the same lady from the store, Ichiru decisively went to her rescue, carefully examining the complex tangled threads to find a way to free her. But then suddenly, Aine turned around in fear, noticing that a sad rain, dangerous for magical creatures, was approaching, which could seriously threaten their safety. They had to hurry if they did not want the web to turn to dust under the influence of the oncoming rain. There was less and less time left. In fear for her life, the aristocrat turned away, not wanting to face the inevitable death and the difficulties ahead. But then Ichiru extended her hand, and the magic flowing from it flowed throughout the space, forming a magical glow. White sparkles sparkling in the air surrounded the monster, creating a kind of barrier between it and the approaching sand, protecting it from danger. When the spider opened her eyes in surprise, she realized that she had been saved by the healer and felt deep gratitude for her help. The monster's paws turned snow-white and completely healed, sparkling with purity. At the same time, the web cracked and Lady Aine began to fall steadily, heading straight towards Ichiru. Naturally, the nobleman noticed how her body had changed, seeing that it had acquired a new shape and got rid of its previous shortcomings. Then, out of nowhere, a man in a raincoat appeared, interrupting the conversation and attracting the girl's attention with his sudden appearance. Futaba turned around, noticing Hisui's presence, and stared at him in confusion, not understanding what he was doing in this place. Placing her hand to her cheek, the elegant Aine greeted the dragon, pleasantly surprised to meet such a familiar and strange creature. The large reptile also greeted the spider like an old friend, in a word, showing a friendly manner of communication. Slightly embarrassed, Ichiru sat with her eyes downcast and listened to the loud sobs that broke the silence and created an atmosphere of awkwardness. At her side sat a lady who didn't believe she would ever meet a dragon again after everything that had happened. But here they are, the three of them sitting together at the same table. After greeting the dragon's companion, the lady introduced herself as Aine Arachne Pruins, the eldest daughter of the Marquis, who was pleased to meet the healer. Immediately, the orphan began to bow to the spider, recognizing her as the daughter of the Marquis, to whom the whole city belonged. The aristocrat did not really like formalities. Even though Aine looked young, she was clearly older than Ichiru. Moreover, the noble lady was very grateful to Futaba for saving her, expressing sincere gratitude for the assistance provided. Despite her appearance, the spider was a knight who defended the empire in difficult times, showing steadfastness and courage in difficult situations. But indeed, Hisui said that he followed orders as a knight, but the fact that he lived in the palace was unknown. In his past life, the dragon was a handsome and brave knight named Hisui Lu Van Lewis, also known as Dragonblade. Radiating subtle beauty and hovering in the sky above the battlefield, he resembled a deity of war stepped out of paintings, with a majestic appearance and a graceful figure, mesmerizing with his presence. Confusedly, Lady Ain recalled how well the dragon fought in battles and struck down villains with his sword, admiring his skill and courage. The ladies of the court immediately fell on their faces upon noticing the majestic man, and were left with broken hearts, amazed by his amazing presence. Ichiru could only imagine how magnificent he looked in his armor, imagining him in its brilliance and grace that emphasized his courage and strength. Interrupting the ladies' conversation, the lord stated that he was grateful to the marquise for protecting this area from visits by cumbersome residents, and apologized for not being able to come and express his gratitude to Ain earlier. And drinking precious tea personally brewed by the marquise's daughter was the highest reward for the former knight, symbolizing recognition and respect. Smiling, the aristocrat promised that she would forever keep in the depths of her soul the brave act of the healer, which left a deep mark on her heart. Indeed, the spider was a wonderful girl, fully worthy of her title, exhibiting all the qualities that could be expected from such a title. When the lid of the teapot was opened, it became clear that the tea had already run out, which caused considerable regret. Hisui took over the task of making tea, leaving the two girls alone so they could continue their conversation without his interference. Left alone, Ain decided to ask Futaba about what exactly happened in the pharmacy in order to understand the events. It was not difficult for the lovely lady to guess that it was Ichiru who brought those roses to create Roslet's potion, taking into account all the circumstances and details of what happened. The orphan immediately began to refuse any reward from the noble lady, claiming that she did not need anything and did not want to accept anything in gratitude. At this moment, the healer came up with a great idea that she could accept the reward as gratitude. Lowering her head, Ichiru awkwardly admitted that she had saved up quite a large amount of money to study healing, but had encountered problems in the process. Accepting the request of the modest girl, the noblewoman offered her help to cover the cost of tuition and was ready to write a letter of recommendations that could greatly facilitate her path to her goal. Moreover, she had a person in her house who could evaluate her magical abilities for free and provide qualified expertise, which was of great value. Smiling gratefully, Ichiru was ready to approach him, but before that they needed to discuss Mr. Dragon in order to be sure of the correctness of their actions. The wind blew, giving a pleasant feeling. Standing next to Futaba, the spider said that thanks to her power, a miracle would happen to magical creatures who would be healed. Lord Lead laughed when he learned that the healer was only 15 years old, which irritated Ain. He considered his age insufficient for such a level of skill. The nobleman said that in this case, Futaba had a less powerful but unique magic that was distinguished by its special character. He had doubts that the girl would be able to heal her, but he was willing to conduct an assessment of her powers to find out how effective her magic was. Standing in the forest, the dragon and his companion said goodbye to the spider, expressing gratitude for the help and support before continuing on their journey. Suddenly, they were joined by another man named Makoto, who had brown hair and was wearing an officer's uniform. Makoto grabbed Lady Ain affectionately, telling him how much the Marquise had worried during her absence, emphasizing how important her safety and return were. Seeing that they were not alone, Mr. Lappin introduced himself by his full name and lover Ain, trying to show respect and courtesy. Together, the two lovers left the dragon and Ichiru, leaving them in the forest to continue their journey. The young man looked truly handsome and happy in the company of the aristocrat, radiating light and joy from their communication and intimacy. Thoughtfully, Futaba followed them with her gaze, watching them walk away and reflecting on the events that led up to this moment. Hisui rubbed his neck tiredly, irritated by how his companion constantly got into trouble, which led to constant worry. The guy turned to Ichiru when she asked if he was going to return to dragon form, wondering about his future plans and intentions. In response, the girl did not receive an exact answer, but only heard that the dragon was going to go take a nap, leaving her slightly bewildered. When the orphan admitted that she would like to enjoy its scent, the man approached her and hugged her, immersing her in his warm embrace. Approaching her ear, he whispered something barely audible and called her a pervert, causing her embarrassment and a blush on her cheeks. Glancing awkwardly at the dragon, the girl noticed that he immediately turned away, hiding his smile. A barely noticeable chuckle escaped his mouth, which he tried to hide by covering his lips with his hand, but the sparks of amusement revealed his true mood. Calling Ichiru a headstrong girl, he began to walk away, leaving her standing thoughtfully. Lying quietly on the fluffy fur of the magical creature, the girl clearly bothered him. If she wanted to sleep, she should have gone home. The girl stood in a dense forest, wrapped in her warm cape, and greeted her friend with a slight smile, feeling the soft breeze gently touching her face. Hisui himself invited the little lady to go with him to his new home, creating a warm and friendly atmosphere for their upcoming time together. The dragon's clawed paw turned out to be the opposite side of the previous night, like a reminder of how much his path and destiny had changed. Compared to the huge creature, Futaba looked tiny and fragile, like a fleeting petal in the shadow of a giant tree. But instead of fear, the lady only smiled, calling him a giant fluffy, which gave the look an extraordinary lightness. Having hugged the large animal, she tenderly stroked its green and light fur, feeling how its warmth and softness enveloped the lady. Waking up, Ichiru noticed that she was no longer lying on the large creature. Instead, she was carefully held in the arms of a man who carefully lifted the maiden. Opening her eyes sleepily, she asked what was happening around, and the guy replied that the strong wind was dangerous to people's health. Doing her best to stay awake, Futaba tried to stay awake as she was carried inside, snuggling closer to the dragon. A few days later, a messenger pigeon arrived, bearing not only an elegantly wrapped gift, but also a formal invitation to tea, kindly sent by Ain. Looking at the elegant new dresses and exquisite accessories with delight and admiration, Ichiru noticed that among the gifts were carefully selected gifts for Shitori. The wolf cub complimented Ichiru when she tried on a new cape made from fine spider threads and was impressed by its exquisite appearance. Futaba was incredibly happy to receive a pink note from her new monster friend, which turned out to be a real source of joy and amazing surprises. Before going to visit the aristocrat, the girl received instructions from the dragon and words of consolation that helped her feel confident. In a new green dress with a pink bow, Ichiru looked incredibly cute and charming, like a living picture from a fairy tale. Lifting the young lady's chin, Hisui paid her a sincere compliment, admiring her elegant new outfit and impeccable taste, which perfectly emphasized her sophisticated beauty. After this, the dragon gently hugged the girl, and with sincere warmth wished her good luck in her future adventures. Futaba couldn't hide her smile as she said goodbye to the owner of the house and expressed her gratitude for the warm welcome. But in the distant past, Hisui also smiled, and his faithful friends, as a sign of special affection and closeness, briefly called the dragon Hisom, which gave their relationship an informal tone. His friend openly told Hisui that he was too close to Malu, and that this was the reason for the subsequent events for which he blamed him. The young man turned around sharply, startled by an unexpected loud scream that sounded very close. The happy rabbit bounced cheerfully across the floor, tightly clutching a large, juicy apple in its paws. Fuku was looking forward to eating the sweet fruit. Throwing the hair at the wall, Hisui, with a deft movement, took the apple from Fuku. This unexpected act was so swift that the rabbit was left confused. The beautiful estate was huge and majestic, attracting the attention of everyone who passed by with its luxurious architecture and well-kept appearance. It was truly an amazing coincidence that Lead turned out to be the very person who was supposed to evaluate magical abilities. He was already waiting impatiently for Ichiru, anticipating her appearance, and preparing to appreciate her talent. Finally, he was given the honor of introducing himself as an imperial diplomat, Ziro Lead, who was forced to remain here for personal reasons, despite his high positions and important responsibilities. Thoughtfully, Ziro leaned closer to the girl, carefully studying her purple, unusual eyes, as if trying to unravel their deep secrets and hidden emotions. Laughing, the lord compared them to amethysts, emphasizing how mysterious and magnificent those violet eyes were, as if full of precious sparkle. Sitting down in a comfortable chair, Lead warned that everything said here should remain strictly within the confines of this room to ensure the confidentiality and safety of the discussion. After this, he asked for a hand to be held over his arm for diagnostics in order to conduct a thorough analysis and assessment of the state of magic. As soon as their fingers touched, green sparks instantly appeared between them, sparkling and iridescent. Magical energy began to fill the space. Lead, with obvious surprise, recoiled when he felt an unpleasant and at the same time tense sensation emanating from an unexpected and mystical phenomenon. In front of Lead, shining with ancient light, created by powerful magic to provide impenetrable protection and create a barrier around him. It turned out that such magic was a wind attribute, which Ichiru did not possess. This meant that the shield was created by someone else with the corresponding magical power and abilities. The girl thought for a moment, and Hisui immediately came to her mind as a possible owner of this attribute. After all, he was a dragon. Placing a finger to his lips and looking with a slight thrill of surprise, Zirko admitted that he himself was not capable of creating such an incredibly powerful barrier. There was a hint of envy in his voice. Politely and with a subtle touch of respect, the Lord asked if it was possible for him to break the defense without violating its integrity. He wasn't going to force it. Ichiru thought about this proposal, noting with pleasure that the path to the dragon was open. After some deliberation, she agreed. Feeling delighted, Lead remembered the past when he said the opposite things, filled with fear of the owner of magic. Then his words were full of hesitation and horror. While still very young, Zirko regretted getting involved with the dragon, realizing all the dangers and consequences that came with this decision. The Lord standing before him was covered in bandages and black sand, which were reminders of his terrible ordeal. The guy cursed his once best friend, bitterly remembering their past friendship. Recognizing the magic signature, Lead realized that Hisui was still alive. This realization gave him mixed feelings. With a fiery explosion, the barrier of green magic was broken. An instant flash of destructive power tore apart the magical field. When My Lady's hand touched Zirko, he did not meet any resistance, and this soft touch seemed to dispel all obstacles, leaving a feeling of lightness and relief. Touching young Ichiru, the man felt something strange and at the same time fascinating. Invisible magic permeated with extraordinary purity and innocence. Looking up, the girl admitted that she could remove sand from other magical creatures. The orphan's words were full of confidence, and in her voice there was a note of pride in her abilities. Lead listened in fascination as she explained that she could also change the trajectory of a falling object, accomplishing something that seemed completely impossible. After her speech, Futaba added that she dreams of becoming a healer and saving other monsters. The healer's words reflected sincere care and desire to bring light and hope to those who need it. Pointing his finger upward, the man asked Ichiru to demonstrate her abilities, expecting to see her magical prowess and skills. Soon a ball of light appeared on the orphan's palms, emitting a soft glow that filled the room with warmth and magic. This sight strongly reminded the Lord of the healer girl who had previously possessed a similar healing ability, creating similar glowing spheres. Instantly raising his hand and raising his voice, the man urgently demanded that Ichiru stop her actions immediately, emphasizing the seriousness of his demand. After this, Zirko suddenly found himself in the grip of a painful fit of coughing, which despite all his efforts to hide, continued to restlessly shake his body. Ichiru began to worry about Lead's well-being, but he simply brushed it off, explaining that the medicine had run out, and there was nothing serious at the moment. In the end, it was concluded that Futaba possessed the rarest and noblest gift of all, which made her extremely unique and valuable. Zirko, feeling tired, suggested dividing the assessment process into several stages. While they were dealing with this, it became clear that Ichiru had the gift of healing. Once it is finally determined that Ichiru does indeed have the gift of healing, Lead will immediately contact the palace's general manager, who will in turn issue the girl an official healer's license. Immediately after this, the orphan, filled with deep gratitude and awe, sincerely expressed her gratitude to the Lord for his help and immense support. Moreover, the Lord, deeply touched by her sincerity and noble humility, decided to give her a special gift to express his gratitude. This gift turned out to be a memory mirror, a compact and sleek device that could record short videos of the owner's memories, allowing important moments to be preserved. Ichiru looked with admiration and awe at the memory mirror that would allow her to record her use of magic and then transfer it to Lead. When asked whether the healer could have healed Zirko, he answered by citing problems associated with this type of magic that could interfere. However, the nobleman hastened to reassure the lady, assuring her that as soon as he took the medicine, his condition would improve significantly and everything would soon be fine. A man's hand rose to repair the damage done to the shield, working carefully to restore it to its original state. And so, after a few moments, the green barrier again became as good as new, shining with renewed strength and restored protection. There were a lot of sweets and cakes on the table, replete with a variety of tastes and aromas, which created a real atmosphere of festive abundance. With a warm and kind smile, Ain reported that Futaba had put in a lot of effort and shown real dedication today. Now it's time for a well-deserved rest. The eyes of the girl with Shitori literally sparkled with delight at the sight of so many goodies that the laughter of the hostess of the event, who could not help but notice and appreciate this sincere joy. In between, the spider added that she had decided to invest in the development of a new bottling in the capital, which deeply surprised Ichiru. She sighed, immersed in memories of her beloved Ain, who left an indelible impression of himself as an extremely kind and noble person. Makoto was human, and despite her frightening second form in which she was a spider, the lady still remained for him the object of deep and sincere love. While sadly reminiscing, Futaba realized the bitter truth. The lifespan of magical creatures was extremely short, as most of them died due to the destructive sand rain. The new Roslet gave the lovers not only confidence and faith in a bright future, but also inspired Aini to overcome her fears and openly reciprocate her love for Makoto, accepting his feelings. The spider, smiling, expressed her firm desire to begin selling the new potion as soon as possible, which the lady considered especially valuable and promising. Blushing in embarrassment, Ichiru realized that her feelings were as deep and sincere as Aini's, which caused her to feel a wave of awkwardness and surprise. While drinking tea, the spider insistently stated that she wanted to discuss something important with her friend. It required full attention and a serious approach. The little wolf also pricked up his ears warily as soon as the conversation turned to love, showing obvious interest in the topic under discussion. Ichiru couldn't help but laugh, admitting that she was just wondering about the complex and multifaceted relationship between Aini and Makoto. Such a thought brought a slight smile and a peaceful mood to her. The aristocrat clearly expressed her point of view, explaining that her opinion was based on personal experience and observations, while Futaba, being still young, was just beginning to form her views. But the orphan really was constantly looking for Hisui and was happy when she noticed him, experiencing a deep sense of satisfaction. Opening her mouth in surprise, Ichiru realized that her heart began to beat faster at the sight of the green dragon, causing her a storm of emotions and excitement. Unable to get rid of the affair, the girl compared all the signs of falling in love, and to her surprise, found that they coincided with her own feelings. Shitori, raising his ears up, also compared the signs of falling in love and looked at his owner with love. The man's strong legs, covered with sand, stood on the floor under the shower, freeing himself from the marks of a hard day and enjoying the cool stream of water. Hisui tried to wash away the black grains of sand that stubbornly remained on his skin, despite all his efforts. Every time the guy thought he'd done it, those pesky marks came back. While going downstairs, the dragon noticed a neighbor returning home with the boy they had recently saved, and this sight filled his heart with joy. The monster greeted them briefly, and to his relief, there was not a trace of the grains of sand left on his body, which he had carefully tried to hide. It was a secret. Additionally, Hisui glanced discreetly at the protective shield he had set up earlier, checking to see if everything was all right with it. The long and intense gaze puzzled the girl, making her feel deep embarrassment and internal anxiety due to the unexpected and unusual attention. Ichiru, tightly hugging Shitori's shoulder, quickly pulled her away, saying as she ran that they were going to take a bath to relax and unwind a little. Hisui's face showed genuine surprise when he witnessed the strange departure of the girl with the wolf cub. Additionally, over time, the dragon noticed that Futaba was acting extremely strangely, appearing overly joyful and clearly out of step with her usual demeanor. The girl explained her behavior by saying that, together with Ain, they decided to stop the endless sandy rain, which created many difficulties and caused a lot of problems. During the meeting with the spider, they discussed that if they combined the stones and Ichiru's magic, they might be able to stop the endless falling of sand on the city, which threatened to destroy it. The grateful lady reported that during her rescue, the healer also redirected the rain, changing its trajectory. And now, as the next marquise and head of the line, she would like to try a way to protect magical creatures, if there is one, and minimize any potential consequences. Hisui's face darkened as he read the letter from the marquise. The previous knight was indebted to her, and this added to the gravity of the situation. Ichiru tried to convince the dragon that now, more than ever, the moment had come when it was necessary to find out the limits of one's capabilities and true strength. The werewolf put forward his condition. He would accompany her throughout the entire journey, providing the necessary support and protection to guarantee safety. The feet stood firmly on the floor, without trembling or giving in to the slightest movement. This was Lord Lead, a courageous and noble warrior, steadfastly resisting the dark side, which tirelessly doubted his loyalty and determination. His face, despite all the trials, retained an expression of determination. Purple butterflies whispered in his ear that the holy war had been stopped, and they, with deep regret, came to terms with the existence of cursed magical creatures that continue to darken the world. But the dragons irritated the purple butterflies most of all, since these powerful creatures, like inevitable shadows, doomed them to exist here forever. Sitting on the sofa in a white uniform and immersed in thought, Aini decisively decided to use the magic stone Frazier to stop the endless flow of sand that threatened to engulf everything around her. This gemstone was blue, symbolizing innocence. It could be filled with magic, and after several activations it would turn into dust. The trio, sitting comfortably in the living room, came to the conclusion that after activation, the stone invariably turned into a useless trinket, losing all its value. Such magic stones will be installed on the highest points of the city and activated when it rains. The goal of this idea is to absorb sand while still in the air before it flies to the ground. Determinedly, she continued to talk about how the lives of residents who have suffered from the accumulative effects of sand over the years would be greatly improved by such a fixture. And Ichiru will stand on the roof of the largest building and act as a magic activator to ensure the effective functioning of the system. The dragon immediately objected, emphasizing that by taking on the role of a magic activator, the healer would become the focus of magical powers, and one should not expect the impossible from her because her capabilities are not limitless. Aini agreed with the dragon's wise words, feeling deeply grateful for Hisui's care for Futaba, and was touched by the attention and support. The dragon's military uniform looked magnificent, with a white uniform with golden shoulder pads giving him an appearance of greatness and strength, as well as emphasizing his masculinity and majesty. Returning his piercing gaze to Ichiru, the dragon sternly ordered her not to exert herself too much during the test, warning her of the possible dangers. The summer residence was several times larger than the Hisui house, and in its grandeur and scope resembled a real emperor's palace, radiating grandeur and elegance. Two workers walked along the road, discussing Lady Spider and her stupid intentions of using the Frazier stone for some trifle, which seemed inappropriate and ridiculous to them. One of the men pushing a cart told his friend that there was no point in stopping the rain, as it would be a wasted effort. As their legs moved forward, they discussed that they should start dispersing different species, since humans and monsters were too different. Few people were interested in the death of monsters due to constant sand. Workers considered magical creatures to be sinful, believing that their presence disrupted the natural order and harmony of the world, causing anxiety and discontent among people. A mysterious figure in a cloak stopped nearby, as if emerging from the shadows, and her presence enveloped everything around with a mysterious feeling. Wanting to stand up for all magical creatures, Ichiru was stopped by a hand grab that interrupted the woman's intentions and made the girl freeze. Hisui stopped the healer, noting that her actions would most likely only add fuel to the fire and would not bring any benefit, but would only make the situation worse without improving the situation for anyone. A maid was already waiting for them at the entrance, who politely greeted the guests, inviting them to enter the estate with a friendly gesture. The orphan had long been determined to stop the torment of magical creatures and protect her friends. She felt strong and determined. With slight trepidation, the girl opened the massive oak doors leading to the mysterious mansion. Stepping inside, the lady felt the cold air wrapping around her. Outside, it was just beginning to rain luminous sand, which softly settled to the ground, giving everything around a magical, almost unreal look. The poor little animal, sensing the first grains of glowing sand, immediately put on its hood and rushed away, escaping from an unusual natural disaster. However, when it seemed that danger would not come, the cute creature raised its head to the sky in surprise, unable to understand what was happening around it. All the other Inhumans also stopped in place, throwing their capes over their heads as protection. They stood waiting, but the rain never started. A bright magical ball shone on the roof of a large building, illuminating the surrounding area with a soft, mystical light, as if inviting everyone to admire its mysterious beauty. At the very center of the sphere was a majestic and shining gemstone of a deep blue color, which with its magnificence was breathtaking and eye-catching. With wide eyes, Ichiru looked at the magic scepter, with the help of which the orphan could control the trajectory of the rain, directing its flows in the right direction. Turning to his friend, Futaba explained in detail that thanks to Aine's magical staff, her magical powers do not deplete quickly. This allows her to use them for a long time. Using a magical scepter not only made it easier to control magic, allowing it to be directed with greater precision, but also made the process of purposefully casting spells much easier and more effective. Joyful, Ichiru agreed with a smile that she felt great, enjoying every moment, and glad that everything was going the way she dreamed. A mysterious figure in a dark cloak watched everything that was happening from afar, hidden by thick shadows and remaining unnoticed, as if the night itself was covering the person with its mysterious veil. It was Lady Spider, amazed by the power of the healer who came out of nowhere. The abilities of this mysterious healer were truly incredible. Quietly, as if afraid to disturb the magical moment, Ain whispered that finally the rain, which could not be stopped for centuries, had stopped. Ain could not hold back her tears of joy, because now she and Makoto could be together for the rest of their lives, enjoying every minute that fate gave them and building a future together full of happiness and mutual love. All this time she stood on the balcony, surrounded by a majestic forest, whose dense crowns, like a living shield, protected them from the outside world. The air was filled with the aroma of freshness. Having previously condemned the spider, the workers froze in surprise when they saw that Fragile had actually managed to make the sand stop. No one believed in the success of the orphan idea. The citizen of Order all this time was watching people who were discussing their mistress and her stupid lover behind their backs, convinced that they could not be a couple. Coming out into the world, Makoto stated that in no case did he want to cause the slightest bit of suffering to his beloved. Lapkin emphasized that it is unforgivable for two men to judge a noble lady. The peasants, desperately trying to justify themselves and prove their innocence, began to put forward arguments in their defense, but the officer and his assistants firmly decided to send them to jail. The fact of the crime was irrefutable. The insult to the honor of her ladyship left no room for doubt. Ichiru continued to diligently accumulate energy and skillfully manipulate the sand. The orphan's strength was running out, and with each passing moment it became more and more difficult to cope with the growing load. Time inexorably continued its course, and her legs, feeling the increasing heaviness, began to give way and tremble, as if every minute brought her closer to the limit of her physical capabilities. Realizing that her legs would no longer be able to support her, Hisui walked over and stopped Ichiru, gently telling her that that was enough for today. There was a limit to everything. The animals soon turned their attention to one particular building that seemed to magically attract and collect most of the rain, like a magnet attracting sand. Since the creatures were below, they could not see who was above and was responsible for their rescue. They could only guess who this mysterious hero was. One of the gray rabbits, gathering his courage, loudly expressed gratitude to their mysterious savior. Words filled with sincere gratitude echoed throughout the area. After him, both the little goat with a horn on his forehead and the majestic big cat, who was the owner of the cafe, expressed their words of gratitude. With her mouth open, Futaba stood on the roof, accepting compliments and gratitude, surprised by the attention and appreciation that was directed in her direction. Immediately, the girl realized that she was being hugged by a dragon, which slowly disconnected and retreated. Hisui bestowed his protection, surrounding her with care and warmth like a caring guardian. In response to the lady's worries that someone might have noticed them, the reptile hastened to assure her that because of the barrier, strangers could not recognize the identities of the strangers. Finally, after a long and dramatic breakup with Ichiru, the former knight, full of regret and nostalgia, turned to her with a request to return his staff. All red with embarrassment, the orphan, drowning in her sad thoughts and anxieties, did not offer much resistance, as if her inner experiences and anxieties had entangled her, depriving her of the strength and desire to fight. This caused the dragon to chuckle. He couldn't help but smile when he noticed that the orphan, all red with embarrassment, resembled a bright, ripe tomato that had been lying in the sun for too long. Wanting to express his sincere feelings and concern, Hisui gently touched her forehead with his lips, giving her a soft kiss that was full of tenderness. After this, the dragon, demonstrating amazing lightness and grace, slowly walked into the distance with a magic scepter, leaving the girl alone. Thus, the man tried his best to hide his blush, but despite all his efforts, his face still turned red. A festive atmosphere reigned in the city. Bright flags fluttered everywhere, elegant tents stood, and monsters joyfully celebrated the long-awaited cessation of the endless rain. Together with Shitori, the orphan went for a leisurely walk through the busy streets of the city, constantly asking him if he wanted to have a snack. Amy, excitedly throwing herself into Futaba's arms, with tears in her eyes and screamed her immense gratitude, her words filled with sincere gratitude and deep feeling. The Marquise was truly happy. She happily entered into a contract with Ichiru to regularly enchant the Bluestones. The rabbit was happily having a lively discussion with the other bunnies, discussing whether it was worth continuing to wear the old, worn-out robe, or whether it was time to move on to new clothes. The mice danced happily in the square, surrounded by twinkling lights, and happily agreed to keep Lady Ane's secret, uniting in their quest to protect her secret. Futaba watched with genuine joy the animals, who seemed not only happy but also full of vitality. To please Hisui, the girl decided to choose a gift for him at the fair, where she went accompanied by a cute and playful wolf cub. Shitori frowned upon hearing the dragon's name, and jealousy instantly filled the werewolf like a dark cloud enveloping his mind and heart. He experienced all the signs of falling in love, which the spider listed for him with such accuracy and insight that now he could not help but realize his true feelings for his mistress. Cursing the stupid reptile, the boy fell into deep sadness, staring out the window and letting his thoughts wander to memories of happy days spent with Ichiru. Shitori frowned, deciding not to have any more stupid pets. Now the guy could fully concentrate on helping his mistress. Turning to Futaba, the little wolf cub called her name, catching her attention and making her wonder what secret intentions he could be hiding behind this simple gesture. Opening his eyes and feeling embarrassed, Shitori began to tell Ichiru about his feelings. The boy's voice trembled with excitement, but there was sincerity in it. Flashing his sharp fangs in the light of the lights, the werewolf loudly added that he liked this girl more than all the others, emphasizing his affection and admiration, which he could not hide. The boy's hand firmly grabbed the healer's hand, and at that moment the wolf cub realized that in order to help her, he must also learn magic. The night sky shimmered with thousands of stars, each of which added its own shining touch to this enchanting and magical landscape, creating an unforgettable spectacle. In the dark on the veranda, illuminated only by distant stars, Hisui sat at a table with only a bottle of drink for company, lost in thought and enjoying the solitude. Then, as the dragon watched the girl, Hisui realized that he had been underestimating her all along. Having once seen amazing healing abilities, he could no longer take his eyes off her. Realizing that this path was dangerous, the man took a glass of drink in his hand, which was supposed to help him forget and momentarily escape from disturbing thoughts. The werewolf drained the entire glass in one gulp, enjoying every moment as if it were the last sip of his life. Throughout the majestic snow-white imperial palace, decorated with sparkling blue domes, rumors spread everywhere about the imminent cessation of the mysterious sand rain and the fate of magical creatures. She who ruled the entire empire walked majestically through the hall. The knock of the souls echoed throughout the room, filling the space with special solemnity and grandeur, emphasizing the high position of the person. The aristocrats unanimously and loudly greeted the son of the empire, a woman on whose shoulders flowed a magnificent red cape, decorated with expensive fur. In response, the head of the empire expressed her gratitude and uttered inspiring words calling for universal glory and prosperity so that every citizen would feel pride and confidence in the future. The council of nobles sat down at a long table. Everyone around already knew that stopping time like an hourglass occurred on the initiative of the Marquise of Aine. After listening to her subjects, the Empress came to the conclusion that she should communicate with the hero of the occasion. To prevent rumors from spreading further, she ordered the Marquis of Pruins to be invited to the palace as soon as possible. Smiling slyly, the Empress, with hair as light as gold, expressed her hopes that the Marchioness would tell them everything and share her secret with them. Calmly, without disturbing anyone, Hisui dozed on the bed, plunging into sweet dreams. His thoughts kept returning to his housemate. When asked what the diplomat was like, Ichiru replied that he was a very polite man and an important person. The only thing that was problematic was the illegible name of the magic evaluator. There was also something wrong with the seal. It was completely green, but in the center there was a strange yellow mark that stood out and attracted attention. The next moment, this symbol flashed brightly with fire, burning everything around and creating the feeling that the air itself began to crack and melt from unbearable heat with unbearable heat. Hisui shuddered in fear, eyes wide. The guy's gaze was filled with horror, and black sand began to appear on his skin, absorbing his body and space. Finally, a long-forgotten name surfaced from the depths of her memory. Futaba said with confidence that the diplomat's name was Ziro Lead, and her voice trembled with excitement, as if this name had magical powers. Jumping up from the cozy, heated bed, the dragon headed towards the massive wooden table, on which lay a small, inconspicuous mirror, reflecting the reflections of the morning light. As if out of nowhere, Ziro suddenly appeared, engulfed in flames. He greeted the dragon, adding that he looked pretty good. Flashing his dangerous green eyes, the werewolf rudely asked what exactly Lead was up to. The male voice sounded like a roar, instilling fear and awe in everyone who dared to object to him. Lead hastened to calm the rude man, explaining that Lady Ain personally asked the diplomat to investigate Ichiru's magic and not go beyond the scope of this assignment. Before completely disappearing into the flames, Ziro explained that he was going to tell the Empress about a healer who has unique abilities. Her Majesty has always had a deep respect for holy magic, revering it much more than all other types of magic, admiring its purity and power. The Lord insisted that healer magic should be used for the benefit of all magical beings. Protecting and supporting the maiden was a task for adults. Standing opposite his former friend, Ziro admitted with impudence and doubt in his voice that he had always considered him unworthy of Ichiru, openly expressing his disdain and dissatisfaction. Tilting his head down, the man added that Hisui seemed to use magic as a shackle for the maiden, chaining him to himself with his spell. The dragon, being a narcissistic egoist, cared only about his own desires. Ordering everyone present to be silent, Hisui carefully watched as the Empire's diplomat slowly dissolved into thin air and as the fire disappeared. The werewolf, filled with rage, grabbed the window and smashed it with force, scattering the glass into hundreds of sparkling pieces that scattered across the room. A blond guy stood in front of me, dressed in a snow-white cloak of a knight, radiating calm and confidence. Came out to meet him, surrounded by many small creatures that resembled animated lumps of dust. These mysterious creatures never wanted to get away from the Holy Virgin. Hisui, with surprise and a slight note of bewilderment in his voice, asked why she had brought with her such a huge number of Keisaran pasarans. Futaba awkwardly replied that these mysterious creatures fell on her themselves. The dragon, with the help of a powerful gust of wind, removed most of the cute monsters and carefully removed the remaining ones from the lady's hair with his clawed paws. Confused, Ichiru froze in place, not knowing how to properly react to what was happening around her. There were still furry creatures on her lip. Hisui, seeking to remind him of his true form as a monster, turned to the healer with the confidence that she might have forgotten about his situation. One of his fingers carefully and tenderly approached the furball stuck on Futaba's face, as if he was afraid of causing her discomfort. The werewolf asked his companion to remain quiet so that he could fully concentrate on the task and help her clean up the trash thoroughly. The couple's faces were so close to each other that you could feel the warmth of their breath, which, like a soft whisper, touched their cheeks and added to the romantic atmosphere of the moment. However, their kiss was interrupted by Shitori, who with rage and jealousy grabbed the werewolf's leg with his fangs, interrupting their magical moment. The three of them went home. Ichiru gently held the wolf cub's hand, and the dragon, with a majestic posture and proudly raised head, walked a little to the side, guarding his companions. The boy, still very young in a dirty cape, desperately rushed through the dark forest. His voice, filled with fear and hope, screamed piercingly and begged for help, creating a feeling of hopelessness. Hundreds of arrows rushed towards him, wanting to damage the boy, like a deadly swarm eager to pierce his body and take his life. Little Hisui suddenly stopped and turned around. His green eyes with vertical pupils were wide open, reflecting fear and surprise. Using his powerful magic, the dragon crushed all his enemies. These events took place 20 years ago, long before the Alan Empire achieved its greatness and became a great power. Only one little Hisui survived, the only one in his class who had magical scales on his body, which protected him from many dangers. Barefoot, hiding his face, the werewolf rushed away, his manic strength spinning out of control. In a mad dash, he tore through the silence of the night, not realizing where he was going. When they found him, they gave him the care of a large sheep in the imperial palace, which was considered the most protected place in the entire country. There, the boy could find refuge and safety. The last survivor of his clan now wore a collar. If he wanted, he could change his appearance to a personal one, but Hisui did not want to do this. The huge monster explained to him that the dragons were attacked by the Yurlu clan, and that he did not need to know any more details. This knowledge would be too dangerous for a child. Having settled into the castle, Hisui went to the library, hoping to learn more knowledge there. Moreover, the baby could already calmly read letters, which gave him the opportunity to immerse himself in the wonderful world of books. Sitting down on the floor and immersed in reading, the dragon learned from one of the ancient books about the religion of the rainbow serpent Yurlungar, and also discovered the rich mythology of the lands of Yurla. Long ago, magical creatures, eager to gain power, rebelled against the rainbow serpent. Upset and saddened by their betrayal, he shed tears, which, falling to the ground, took the lives of animals and created sand rain. The book fell to the floor with a thud as the boy finally learned the truth about the holy war and about his clan, which stole the most power from the deity. The animal that was taking care of Hisui ran up to him, admonishing him that it was impossible to treat old books like that. Ancient texts contained important knowledge and required respectful treatment. But the boy had no time for this. Covering his eyes with his hands, he began to cry because of the bitter truth that fell on him, like heavy clouds hiding the sunlight. Snuggled up to a large plush sheep, the werewolf mourned his sad fate and reflected on how he was left completely alone in this huge and deserted world. The boy, leading a sheep, walked through the royal courtyard surrounded by aristocrats, feeling their sidelong, contemptuous glances on him, like blades cutting his soul. Hisui could clearly hear those around him whispering about his rage, assuring each other that in a fit of rage he could destroy several dozen adults. In the ceremonial hall, the young empress was already waiting for the dragon. Sitting majestically on the throne, she was the only one who was not afraid and boldly looked into his eyes. The woman admitted that a terrible war was coming. Followers of a terrible cult began to hunt citizens of the empire, and now the empress was no longer going to remain silent. Hisui possessed incredible strength and power that allowed him to fight any enemy. However, now, by the mercy of the mistress, he received not only a new name, but also a unique opportunity to defend the country. Then serious training began for the boy, who learned to fight and wield a sword masterfully under the guidance of experienced mentors. Soon he was joined by another young man of the same age, who was not just an ordinary guy, but a fire salamander capable of taking the form of a lizard. Patting the dragon on the shoulder, Zirko said with a smile that they were alike in many ways, and proposed to enter into friendship so that together they could learn to be real knights. With a wide smile on his face, the red-haired boy, introducing himself by his full name, expressed joy and enthusiasm about his new acquaintance. Together they grew up, and now, walking through the picturesque grounds of the palace, they discussed with excitement and hope the arrival of the Holy Virgin, who had the miraculous ability to heal any wounds and illnesses. A whole crowd of people had already gathered in the narrow passage, excitedly and impatiently getting to know the healer who had recently arrived in the city. The doctor turned out to be a sweet girl with long blue hair that looked like fish ears. Her pale skin and blue dress created the image of a mysterious and enchanting being, as if emerging from the depths of the sea. Noticing her peers, Lead and Hisui, among the crowd, she immediately headed towards them, lighting the way with a joyful smile that, like a ray of light, pierced everything around. Zirko blushed embarrassedly, and gathering his courage with a gentle smile on his face, he put his hand to his heart. Then the guy, bowing his head slightly as a sign of respect, politely introduced himself to the young lady. Among the crowd there were alarming whispers about Hisui, the dragon who, daring to approach the Holy Maiden, personified the symbol of destruction and chaos. The healer named Malu did not pay any attention to the whispers of the crowd and their stupid prejudices. She herself was special, standing out from the crowd with her own personality. Malu said that she was a mermaid who came here to study with healers in order to heal as many surrounding creatures as possible in the future. Deciding to behave like a real boar, the dragon turned away from the Holy Maiden, thinking that her kindness was explained only by the fact that the girl had not yet seen the horrors happening in this country. The lady only understandingly agreed that she would have to try and learn everything quickly, showing maximum attention and diligence. Hisui sincerely hoped that he would never meet this strange lady again. However, the mermaid, as if by fate, constantly found them with Zirko, no matter where they went. Cupping her face in her hands, the healer in a panic shared her revelations with the werewolf, admitting that she could not sing at all, and tomorrow she was supposed to perform a song at court. The man said that she should have refused, but sweet Malu was too modest. Wanting to know how bad it was, he asked her to sing. When the beautiful girl began to sing, the young man covered his mouth with his hand, trying his best to hold back his laughter at her unsuccessful attempts. But everyone believed that the sirens sang like angels. The embarrassed Holy Virgin sat down next to her and began to complain about the mockery from the large reptile, which gave her no peace and made her suffer. Passing by, Zirko stopped under the shade of a spreading tree to see how his friends were progressing in their exciting business. Sitting alone and staring at his body, the dragon realized an interesting thing. He could hide the signs of sand that hardened on the monster's skin. In the books Hisui read, the power of dragons was described as something extraordinary, as the evil reptile stole it from the deity, which gave them incredible abilities. With a rage that burned in his soul like wildfire, the man clenched his fists to the white knuckles, gradually falling into a state of frantic rage. Sitting next to his best friend, Lead admitted that he noticed how Melu looked at the dragon in love and how he was always afraid that they would leave him alone. Bowing his head, the werewolf protested. The handsome friend was very mistaken, and on the contrary, he should take a closer look at himself. Lead did not understand his colleague's words about the power of revenge, who claimed that it gives sharpness and determination, while love only dulls the sword and makes it weaker. This is how the world worked, and it was useless to deny obvious facts. The dragon could not forget his painful past and the tears shed in despair. Therefore, it is not surprising that conflict soon arose between Lead and Hisui in the middle of a mission at night. Zirko defended his position, believing that there was no point in excessive cruelty and shedding of blood, but the werewolf had a different opinion. In his opinion, their task was the total destruction of the enemy, and only in this way could they bring the end of the war closer. Roughly but confidently, his faithful friend stated that he was the captain, and that is why all decisions were made solely by him. At that moment, Hisui allowed himself to be completely consumed by anger. He was tormented by constant anxiety, and no one gave him a moment of peace, not the slightest chance to breathe calmly. The dragon had to pay dearly for his overconfidence. The man was quickly caught and taken prisoner as the last survivor of his clan. These villains turned out to be fanatical followers of an ancient cult who sought to present a special offering to their deity. They believed that only through this sacrifice could they earn his favor. The guy's hands were shackled with special magical handcuffs, which prevented him from moving and took away all his strength, as if invisible chains were emptying the creature to his very soul. The dragon thieves discussed among themselves that, despite his young age, he behaved too courageously and calmly. Unable to contain his rage any longer, Hisui with a crash broke the magical collar that limited the abilities of magical creatures and released all his power. The army of knights that found the sectarians was ready to immediately attack them in order to justify the expectations of the Empress and protect the city from the impending threat. There was a loud explosion of magic, accompanied by a blinding green light that illuminated everything around and deafened those present. The evil dragon, with uncontrollable fury, destroyed his enemies indiscriminately, completely surrendering to revenge. He spared no one on his way, turning everything into ashes and ruins. Breathing heavily and kneeling down, Hisui tried to regain his breath. The guy felt deep satisfaction from the accomplished revenge, which finally brought long-awaited relief. However, his joy quickly evaporated when he realized the full scale of what he had done. A cold fear ran down his spine, and the world seemed to plunge into darkness. The hospital employee expressed her deep gratitude to Malu for her invaluable contribution, emphasizing her incredible dedication and caring attitude towards patients. Exhausted and barely able to stand, the healer felt her body desperately need long-awaited rest and restful sleep. But she was unable to rest for at least a few hours, because a young man appeared who brought with him alarming news that destroyed all hopes of a respite. The beautiful healer immediately rushed to help to the place where, after a difficult battle with the occultists, the wounded captain lay. There, inside the tent, Hisui was already sitting, his head bowed low, as if he had done something wrong. His pose and gaze, full of sadness and remorse, reflected the depth of his inner struggle and regret. Turning to his friend's call, the man frightened the lady with his empty, lifeless eyes, devoid of any shine. Nearby lay Zirko, who had turned into a terrible monster. He was barely breathing and was unconscious, like a lifeless doll thrown to the ground. Hisui, full of despair and anxiety, turned to Malu for help. The dragon begged her if the maiden could somehow help their friend, she would do so immediately and save Lead from certain death. Despite her fatigue, the mermaid could not refuse the dragon and agreed to try to help. The kind woman's heart was filled with compassion for others. The rest sat outside the tent in tense anticipation, passing excited glances to each other, filled with anxiety and impatience. Every moment could change the outcome of the situation. The werewolf was among them when he heard that the saint suddenly felt ill. The man immediately hurried to move aside the fabric of the tent to see for himself. And indeed, the siren was completely blackened from her tail to the very top of her head, covered with dark sand, which sucked the life out of magical creatures. Not paying attention to anyone, the girl continued the treatment, ready to give everything just to save the fire salamander, even if the price was the death of the healer herself. Hisui could only watch in horror and helplessness as he lost his best friend for the second time through his own fault, because it was he who brought her here. Jirko eventually recovered and his arms were completely regenerated, but the guilt for past mistakes and the death of his beloved weighed on his soul, causing him to slowly go crazy. The sick guy screamed, angry at his friend and at the whole world. Malu deserved a long and happy life, and this injustice tore his heart. The dragon could only listen to the accusations against him, not having the right to object and being forced to carry this burden until the end of his days. Covering her face with her hands, the salamander sadly thought that it would be better if the mermaid had never tried to save him, expressing all her pain and despair in this moment. Getting close to the reptile turned out to be a fatal mistake for Zirko, and the lizard realized this only when all paths to correction were already closed, leaving him with a bitter feeling of loss and regret. Deciding to hide from everyone, the dragon, covered with sand, was quietly living out its last days, when something suddenly fell on top of it, disturbing the peace and quiet. This someone turned out to be an unusually beautiful girl with thick brown hair and mesmerizing violet eyes. A little later, she introduced herself by the name Ichiru. While at home, Lady Ain loudly announced that she was going to go to the Empress's palace. The ruler expressed a desire to know all the details of the mysterious absorption of rain. Ichiru was deeply shocked when she learned that the imperial order to conduct an assessment of her magical abilities had finally been issued, something the orphan had persistently sought for a long time. A few days after the spider was summoned to the luxurious throne room, Futaba was also invited inside along with Shitori. Before letting her guests go, the Marchioness emphasized that they should return to her in a couple of days, and then they could go to the capital together. The White Lady was calm for the Holy Maiden, knowing that in the palace she would be treated with favor, appreciating her healing magic and outstanding abilities. Ichiru knew that in the past, the moments when she should have stopped using magic were tracked by Hisui. Now the girl had to learn to do it on her own. The orphan wanted to practice using magic and controlling it before leaving, in order to be confident in her abilities and prepared for the upcoming tests. While the girl was thinking about where to find Fuku for training and how best to prepare for the upcoming tests, her thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the sound of footsteps of an approaching man. It was the dragon that opened its huge wings, and invited Ichiru into its arms, offering protection and comfort in this difficult moment. In surprise and incomprehension, the girl stared at the guy, trying to understand what was happening and understand what he wanted from her. My thoughts were full of questions and doubts. Realizing that the hug was a means of casting a shield, Futaba threw herself into Hisui's arms. The maiden was worried that the dragon's spell would interfere with the assessment of her abilities. The werewolf explained in detail that as soon as the trap reaches the capital, all spells cast will instantly dissipate, and nothing will anymore be able to interfere with a thorough check. The man's arms hugged Ichiru tightly, trying to convey their strength and confidence. The dragon added that she had a long way ahead, on which protection would definitely not hurt. Shitori embarrassedly refused the embrace of the large reptile, not knowing how to react to such an unexpected manifestation of care. Before leaving the estate, Futaba kindly asked the owner about his well-being, and asked if he had any symptoms similar to those of sand. The owner of the house just waved it off with a smile, assuring the Holy Virgin that he felt fine and there was no reason to worry. Lying in bed with the wolf cub, Ichiru could not sleep. The amount of rain decreased slightly, but it still continued to fall, taking lives. Suddenly, Fuku, a little bunny, came to the girl's bed with a wolf cub, and his appearance frightened the Holy Virgin. Winking at the girl, scared to death by his sudden appearance, the rabbit called her an early bird with a playful smile. His fur had a grayish tint. Outraged, Ichiru froze in surprise upon learning from Fuku that the sand was in fact slowly but inexorably consuming Hisui. The dragon just didn't want the healer to worry about him. At first, the orphan thought it was just an inappropriate joke. But then, overcome with anxiety, she asked with obvious concern in her voice how much sand the dragon was covered with. In a past life, she also showed concern for her pet Mahu, carefully asking him about his well-being and condition before leaving him alone to die. The next day, the owner of the dog, locked in a cage, finally decided to take him to the veterinarian. But unfortunately, it turned out that it was already too late. Ichiru jumped out of bed, intending to check on Hisui. The woman's heart beat with fear and horror. An alarming premonition spread in her chest. The saint quickly ran to the door behind which was the dragon's room and began knocking loudly, desperately calling her friend's name, hoping that the guy would hear her. Ichiru, feeling a little nervous, carefully turned the doorknob and, gathering her courage, quietly asked if she could come in. However, only silence came in response. There was no one in the previous owner's room. There was little furniture, but the large windows allowed light to pour in freely, filling the space with a soft glow. Confused, Ichiru and Fuku looked around, but there really wasn't a soul inside and not a single trace indicating where the owner could have gone. The lady began to tremble with fear and excitement and began to shake as she could not get rid of anxious thoughts, worrying about Hisui's health. The rabbit, noticing Ichiru's concern, began to worry himself, realizing that he had unwittingly caused what happened, and decided to tell the whole truth. Therefore, the bunny assumed that Hisui used Roslet's potion to change his appearance. If Futaba asks him about it directly, the dragon himself will tell the whole truth. Running outside, the girl rushed to find her friend, lamenting how naive she had been before, and realizing that she should have been more attentive. Futaba ran with such frantic speed and determination that she completely failed to notice the obstacle in her path. Having lost her balance, the orphan began to fall. Trying unsuccessfully to hold on to the grass, the lady clung to each stalk with all her might, hoping that this would help her not fall off the cliff. But the strength quickly faded. Stretching her hand forward and desperately calling for help, Ichiru prepared for the worst, realizing that at this critical moment, fate could be cruel. And then suddenly a mysterious silhouette appeared. The familiar cloak fluttered majestically in the wind with mystery. It was a dragon who, at just the right moment, grabbed the girl, saving her from an inevitable and painful collision with the ground. Futaba screamed joyfully, unable to contain her delight and relief that the man was alive and well. The saint burst into tears, saying that it might be too late to heal the dragon, and he might die before Ichiru could save him. Futaba stood motionless as the man questioned whether this was the reason for her long and persistent search, hoping to hear the truth from her lips. Green symbols began to appear one after another, forming a single word, and crystal magic shards sparkled around them, creating a magical atmosphere. Standing opposite the guy, the girl tried to figure out whether it was the Hisui barrier. which, according to rumors, was so powerful that it could repel any attacks and protect against the most dangerous magic. Instead of a guy, a boy appeared, a young version of a werewolf. With regret in his voice, he apologized to the girl for not finding the courage to tell her the whole truth earlier, knowing that this could change their destinies. The adult Hisui explained that ignorance breeds fearlessness, and that was why the saint was able to remain by his side, unaware of the hidden dangers and sinister secrets that surrounded them. After this, the former knight of the empire fell silent. Something prevented him from continuing the story, as if an invisible force was shackling his words and making it impossible to speak. Ichiru asked not to force the magical beast to tell if it did not want to, and also to return to its real form in order to stop the deception and allow the truth to come out. It was not worth using wind magic for such a small thing. Futaba felt anxious about the consequences that could follow from this rash decision. The dragon looked sadly at his sweet companion and then said that he was not ready to completely say goodbye to his life. The thing was that Hisui had a hard time accepting Ichiru's magic. Moreover, he told the whole story about his old healer friend and Zirko, revealing the details of their long and difficult relationship. The girl did not understand why he was telling her about his sad and difficult fate, plunging the saint into events of the past that seemed distant and unfamiliar. Melu was supposed to leave a deep imprint on Hisui's soul after her tragic death right before his eyes, forever changing his inner world and outlook on life. Ichiru always felt that the dragon worried about her too much, but she could not even imagine that Hisui carried such a heavy load with him, hiding his fears and pain deep inside. The werewolf, tired of the prolonged silence, attracted attention by breaking the silence, and asked Futaba if she was now afraid of knowing the whole truth about him. If the healer, at the first meeting with the reptile, knew about his true state of affairs, then most likely she would have been frightened, and gripped by fear, would have avoided further meetings in every possible way. The sad lady asked if it was possible to somehow remove the attacks of pain, hoping to hear consent and find a way to save her friend from painful suffering. The man answered in the negative, explaining that the attacks of pain were the last defense to preserve Hisui's life, and eliminating them could lead to unpredictable consequences. With a quick step, the healer walked towards the guy, reminding him that earlier he had said that the incident in the past was the last one, and it would not happen again. Getting closer, Ichiru suggested that if she stayed close, nothing bad would happen. Perhaps even if she healed him gradually, she could cure him completely. But a sudden gesture stopped her, preventing her from moving forward and getting closer to the man, as the maiden had hoped. Hisui, looking her straight in the eyes, warned that no one knew what could happen next. It could be dangerous. Inside, the dragon didn't understand how anyone could be happy with him. From now on, the road to the palace was open for Futaba, and the saint did not need to deliberately step on this thorny path. Admitting to himself and the girl, Hisui said that she would be much better off somewhere else than with him, and that brighter away from the difficulties he brings. Cruel words brought only pain to the orphan, who, despite understanding the futility of her attempts, could not help her friend. Slowly, the man began to loosen his grip on the girl's hand, trying not to cause her any discomfort or distress. Not wanting to give up so easily, Ichiru wanted to confess her feelings to the dragon, but the lady was suddenly interrupted, depriving her of the opportunity to express everything that had accumulated in her heart. The magical barrier began to collapse under the onslaught of fiery explosions that blinded with bright flashes and threatened to destroy everything around. It turned out that the source of the explosions was Zirko, who had long been targeting the dragon. However, what exactly he needed from the reptile remained unknown. Shocked that the intruder was led, Ichiru's mouth opened wide. She couldn't believe that the imperial diplomat was a villain. Leaning closer, Hisui soothingly reminded that the holy maiden and the wolf cub had powerful protective magic cast on them. This magic was able to protect them from any threat. A human figure suddenly appeared in front of the couple, rudely violating their personal space and forcing them to retreat. This unexpected act added tension to their interaction. Jirko, dressed in a classic suit and his skin covered in black sand, stood in front of them. The lord was surprised to see that the healer was also with the dragon. Unfortunately, Lead's petrification only continued to worsen. His skin became increasingly covered in black sand. Turning to the mist, the gentleman warned her that it was dangerous to be so close to the dragon. Moreover, he advised not to succumb to the charm of the magical creature, because no matter how cute it may seem, there still remained a monstrous element in its essence. Hisui was a mysterious and sinister reptile that could easily turn a person into a sacrifice of its insatiable pride, leaving a trail of terror and reverence in its wake. Standing in the forest and looking at the former knight's back, Futaba couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Despite all the gloom of his appearance, the man did not wish her harm. Hisui glanced over his shoulder at Ichiru, as if checking if she was all right, and his eyes expressed more concern than she would have expected from such a grim creature. And when the man gently hugged the girl, giving her peace and comfort, he allowed her to live in his pranks with magic, surrounding her with care and understanding. That's right. With such a penetrating and kind gaze of green eyes, it would be impossible to treat someone like a victim, and even more so, they would not be able to emit such a sincere smile. Ichiru stepped forward, meeting Zirko's gaze resolutely. Without a trace of fear, she began to confront him, firmly declaring that everything was not as he claimed. Instead, she called Hisui a very sympathetic dragon, not at all as scary and bad as they tried to make him out to be, emphasizing his kindness and nobility. Frowning and putting her hand to her chest, the saint exclaimed that Lead was wrong and deeply mistaken, her voice sounding with confidence and righteous anger. Suddenly, Ichiru felt herself begin to rise into the air, as if an invisible force was forcing her to float, giving her a feeling of flight and freedom. It was the power of the dragon. The girl began to rise higher and higher, moving away from the place where today's conversation between old friends was supposed to take place, leaving their argument far below. After which, a high wall appeared in front of the lady, consisting of crystals shimmering green, like a magical barrier protecting from the entire outside world. Left alone with Hisui, Zirko noticed that his former friend's face changed after his companion left, acquiring a darker and more stern expression. To this, the dragon stated that the former knight himself insidiously took advantage of the saint's trust in order to get closer to his old comrade, manipulating her kindness and faith in him for his own selfish purposes. Surrounded by crystals, Lead came to terms with the fact that he was slowly dying. He staggered from fatigue and weakness from side to side, losing his last strength. Hisui did not lose hope of conveying to Zirko that he never put his life and his pride on the scales, including the life of a familiar mermaid. What happened was just an accident. Immediately, at the mention of Malu, a fiery explosion hit the dragon's shield with a deafening roar, flashing dazzlingly and scattering around with dazzling sparks, creating a mesmerizing spectacle. Lead was enraged at the mention of his dead lover's name and, overcome with rage, struck mercilessly. His gray eyes, full of pain, did not look away from the enemy. There was a loud collision of fire and fragments of green wind, two elements merging into a furious whirlwind, tearing the space around. The image of Malu appeared in the salamander's memory, which he was never able to protect and save from adversity. Instead, he was rendered useless, and the memory burned his soul. Lying on a soft pillow, the guy could not hold back the tears that flowed from his eyes. The captain was miraculously saved and taken to the hospital. His friend stood nearby and also wiped his eyes with his hand, trying to hide his sadness and melancholy. The dragon tried his best to be strong to support his comrade in this difficult moment. From time to time, Hisui changed wet towels to monitor Zirko's condition, helped change his clothes when he was sweating, and brought water, trying to ease his friend's suffering. In response, the guy heard only rude words with requests to stop visiting the patient and refusals to accept help. Lead still remembered eavesdropping on his friend's conversations, observing how revenge was important to the dragon. However, despite his thirst for revenge, the dragon did not lose his charm, managing to remain attractive. Zirko himself hated competition, but the reptile clearly enjoyed competition, so the man had no choice but to accept the challenge and enter the game. Hisui tried to reach out to the salamander by shouting his name, while simultaneously remembering to fight off the fire and flames that threatened them both. His movements were precise and polished. With a quick movement, the dragon dodged another attack, its flexible body deftly twisting, avoiding the flash of fire that rushed past. Lead also deftly dodged the green spells that tried to grab the captain. With a crash, the blows were still able to break through the werewolf's magical shield, and when he saw this, he frowned. The magical protection he relied on began to crumble under the force of the attacks. Suddenly, two large cold sparrows swooped down on Hisui, chirping happily and wanting to play with him. Their icy wings shimmered in the light as they swirled around him, creating swirls of frosty air. With surprise, the dragon realized that these were not ice birds, but water birds, when he was able to take a closer look at them. Drops of water flowing from their plumage created a sparkling aura around them. Suddenly, the face of Ichiru appeared from the body of the soft fur of the sparrow, who had been hiding there all this time, skillfully hiding her presence. Standing in front of the man who allowed her to live in his house, the girl screamed, demanding that they stop immediately. Her voice sounded desperate and heartfelt, reflecting all the pain and anxiety. Then suddenly the saint realized that the attacks had stopped and everything around had become calm. Silence enveloped them, and a sense of peace filled the space. There in the distance, the dragon's green magic was holding a small black creature, which, upon closer inspection, turned out to be the same imperial diplomat and longtime acquaintance of Hisui. Covered in black sand, the salamander coughed in a fit, clearly suffering. His breathing was ragged and every movement was laborious, demonstrating the depth of his torment and despair. With surprise, the girl realized that Lead's true appearance had appeared before her. His black, sand-covered salamander revealed the truth about his true appearance. Trying to get out, the black monster moved in different directions, as if in agony, trying to escape, although it was he who first started hunting the dragon. Ichiru noticed with horror that the monster began to disappear, turning into sand, slowly crumbling and leaving behind only emptiness. Also noticing this, Hisui waved his hand, from which sparks of green magic flew, illuminating the space around and stopping the process of the monster's disappearance. Immediately, Zirko rose into the air and began to move smoothly towards people, as if hovering above the ground, leaving behind a barely noticeable trace of a magical aura. Having picked up Lead, who was squirming and trying to get out, Hisui gently but firmly asked him to calm down, warning that otherwise he might die from exhaustion. The birds, after much discussion among themselves, made a final decision to leave the place. Having completed their important mission, they went home. The dragon clearly had no intention of harming Zirko, holding him carefully in its powerful paws. He tried to reach out to his old friend, radiating warmth and kindness. To attract the salamander's attention, the dragon said that Malu looked at Zirko until her last breath. His voice trembled with memories, trying to convey the depth of sadness and significance of these words. Waking up, the black beast opened his eyes at the mention of his old lover. His gaze reflected the pain of memories and longing for lost times. Walking closer to the two young men, the healer, radiating confidence and compassion, offered her help in healing lead. Wanting to help the monster, she handed over a blue gem, a fregure that could be carried, and had the ability to cure poisonous sand. After this, the holy maiden, with a soft smile on her lips, declared that she intended to give Lead this precious stone at their next meeting. The words were imbued with sincerity. After this, Ichiru added that Malu, most likely on the contrary, wanted to save Zirko by using the last of her magic on him so that he would live, which means the salamander should have appreciated her gift as a symbol of deep love. In the past, looking at the mermaid whose skin was turning black from the poisonous sand, Zirko begged her to stop. The girl was beautiful, with a determined look in her golden eyes and a loyal heart. Waking up in the hospital, Lead cried, unable to accept the reality of being without his lover. Even though the healer saved him of her own accord, the loss was too great for his heart. The man continued to blame his friend, although in reality he simply could not forgive himself for his helplessness. He should have accepted the truth from the very beginning. Firmly and with determination in her voice, Ichiru stated that it was her sincere and adamant desire to keep Lead alive. The Holy Virgin was ready to fight to the last so that this goal could be achieved. Lead's lover, the healer, would probably say that if she were here at this moment, then her age, as well as her thoughts and feelings, would remain exactly the same. Having stopped resisting, the salamander extinguished its flame. The man's eyes softened, and he made a wise decision, to accept the offer of his longtime friend and his charming companion. Ichiru smiled widely, her eyes shining with happiness and inspiration. because she had the opportunity to save a new magical creature that glowed with a mysterious aura. Tears flowed from the monster's eyes, and despite all his incredible strength, the guy sincerely wished that it was not he, but Malu, who would survive. But now he was powerless to change anything. Sitting on the dragon's powerful paws, Lead sobbed, drowning in bitter tears, while his two friends tried to console him. He still deeply loved the beautiful mermaid, and knew that his love for her would be eternal. The wolf cub woke up from sleep. His large eyes slowly opened, and he blinked sleepily, as if trying to return himself to reality after sweet and enchanting dreams, where the world was soft and cozy. Looking at the place next to him, the werewolf realized with alarm that it was empty, and Ichiru was nowhere to be seen. His heart began to beat faster as he realized that she could have walked away, leaving him alone. At this time, the girl carefully examined her friend, Hisui, on whose fur there was not a single clean spot. There was black sand everywhere. With the help of the magic stone, slowly but gradually, Zirko began to heal and brighten. Magical power gradually drove out the darkness and restored his original essence. And then, Hisui learned the truth from the salamander, who, with bitterness in her voice, said that the war was not over yet. The salamander herself personally participated in long and tense negotiations with a hostile country. The war had significantly weakened the country, leaving it defenseless against its enemies, and the Empire told the purple butterflies that it was ready to return their territories if they agreed to sign a peace treaty. To such a proposal, the cloaked people replied that they would never be able to forgive the dragon, who had sinisterly committed so many misfortunes and destroyed countless numbers of their fellow citizens. Indeed, before the appearance of Ichiru, Hisui's lifespan was approximately calculated on paper as the inevitable outcome of his existence, noted on the pages of ancient predictions. The evil butterflies, flying in the cage, asked why the dragon was still alive, but they continued to be deceived. If the promise was broken, they intended to act immediately. Tired Zirko had almost fallen asleep. Hisui, noticing this, hastened to assure him that he could rest, and they would discuss all important issues later. Without thinking twice, the dragon handed over his friend to Ichiru, completely trusting her, since he needed to move away. He himself was confident that the girl would cope with the task. The saint, tenderly taking lead into her hands, asked with deep emotion and anxiety where the dragon was going to go, leaving her in a state of complete bewilderment and anxiety. She tried to stop the young man, trying to guide him on the path of truth, and first of all, to help get rid of the sand that covered his body. Desperately, Futaba agreed to accept all his attacks, and despite the thorny path and difficult relationships, she was ready to stay by his side. The maiden screamed in utter despair that Hisui bore no blame, and that he, like all other magical beings, had an unconditional right to be healed, despite all the circumstances. This made a deep impression on the dragon, who, as if enchanted, stopped and with invisible alertness fixed his penetrating gaze on the healer. Ichiru again tried to confess her feelings, but, feeling a painful soreness in her throat, as if someone was stopping her from speaking, she froze, unable to utter a word. Leaning towards the holy maiden with deep respect, the former knight, hugging her face with gentle hands, looked down at her with reverent affection, as if he wanted to preserve this moment forever. The sweet lady tried to utter at least one word, but despite all her efforts, her voice remained quiet and invisible, as if a dull silence had swallowed up all her attempts to express her thoughts. After kissing the girl, the man with sincere feeling said that he loved her and wanted to protect her more than anything else, which greatly embarrassed Futaba, leaving her confused. After the guy left, the girl was left alone, and tears continued to flow from her eyes without stopping, leaving wet marks on her face. Soon, Shitori appeared in the forest, who, overcoming obstacles and stumbling over tree roots, quickly rushed towards his mistress, never ceasing to scream from the excitement and anxiety that filled his soul. The boy, with a look of surprise on his face, asked why Lead looked as if he was enveloped in the shadow of coal ash, and why the girl was crying bitterly as if her heart was torn. The healer brushed off the boy's persistent questions, explaining that her priority now was to heal Zirko as quickly as possible, while Hisui went about his business. Since it was extremely dangerous to be near the dragon, he did not allow anyone to get close to him and always remained alone, immersed in darkness and surrounded by fragments of his magic. The wolf cub stared blankly at the reptile, carefully examining it and noticing in surprise that Hisui did not emit unpleasant or dangerous odors at all. Quietly and with a hint of thoughtfulness, Ichiru agreed with the boy, emphasizing that his words were not only truthful and fair, but also reflected a deep understanding of the situation. The dragon, possessing incomparable strength and power, experienced inner fear of itself, fearing its own power and unpredictability, which could lead to irreparable consequences. The boy, thinking deeply about the situation, came to the conclusion that they should have taken responsibility for their friend, looked after him, and provided the necessary help. Shitori gently placed his paw on Ichiru's face, and with a warm smile offered to go together in search of the dragon, assuring that under his protection they would be completely safe and nothing would threaten them. While the maiden continued to cry bitterly, the wolf cub, trying to console her, gently wiping her tears, assured with warm care that everything would definitely work out and they would be able to overcome all difficulties together. Smiling, Shitori was glad that in this life he had the opportunity to support his mistress with both words and actions. He extended his hand and waited patiently for her response. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, Fuku appeared on the boy's head, and he was pleasantly surprised to see Mr. Lizard. The werewolf looked up at the rabbit. Leading his mistress by the hand through the dense forest, the boy carefully pointed the way, following his intuition and keen senses because he could catch the subtle scent of a dragon lurking somewhere ahead. The saint froze in awe when she learned that it was also possible to spy on men with the help of magic. She herself could do it. It turned out that Shitori had mastered the art of magic, and his mastery in this field became clear and obvious, which he confirmed with pride and confidence. Futaba watched with slight embarrassment and genuine interest as her little friend, full of enthusiasm, tried to create his own magic and demonstrate the success he had achieved. In a dark hall, shrouded in thick darkness and hidden under long cloaks, a mysterious society, insinuatingly whispering, discussed the mysterious disappearance of Zirko and the fate of the hated dragon. A human figure with blonde hair wearing a robe angrily called the magical creature vile trash who should not be trusted. When the occultists were about to decisively fight the giant reptile, suddenly there was a deafening roar that shook everything around and caused a wave of anxiety and fear. In a dark shelter filled with an ominous atmosphere, Hisui suddenly appeared, whose impressive size far exceeded the size of all those present combined. With sarcasm in his voice, he said that he decided to personally visit them before they managed to create unrest in the empire, as if foreshadowing the inevitable consequences of their actions. Violet butterflies, sparkling with shades of amethyst, began to flutter nervously in the cage, overcome with panic and horror. The instinct of desperate flight in the face of an impending threat awoke in them. One of the people mockingly addressed the impudent man, calling him a fool, and added with contempt that they had a whole arsenal of tools to cope with the evil werewolf. Easily startled and surprised, Hisui staggered back in complete confusion as a barrage of jabs rained down on him, causing him to feel a deep sense of anxiety and uneasiness. A clawed paw, sparkling with sharp claws, slowly reached out to the man with long hair, as if wanting to cause him terrible harm. However, contrary to expectations, the man only devoured other people's memories. Standing in front of the magic spell, the dragon confirmed that if the memory disappears, then the contract will disappear. For some time, the occultists had to quiet down. A bright green glow suddenly burst out of the hand, like a magical magic, enveloping everything around with mystical light and turning the space into a bewitching world of mysterious lights. Tired Hisui, having exhausted all his strength and experiencing incredible fatigue, could barely stand on his feet, slowly and with difficulty moving through the endless flowering field. Ichiru continued to seem like a carefree and naive girl to the man, and he could not forget her words and awkward attempts to confess his feelings. Remembering their first meeting, the werewolf cursed angrily, believing that the normal reaction to his threat would be fear and an attempt to escape from the huge monster. But the holy maiden turned out to be an exception to this rule. The girl easily moved the dragon's soul with her smile and kindness. The longer she stayed in his presence, the more the guy began to fear that he would lose control of himself. Images of old friends, loved ones, whose fate was trials of fate, death, and misfortune in my head, leaving a deep mark on my soul. Turning around, Hisui quickly moved away from this place, deciding that this should not happen to Ichiru in order to avoid repeating the same tragic mistake. The sweet girl, with a sincere smile on her face and genuine joy in her eyes, hugged the magical creature, not paying attention to its potential danger, which could easily harm her. Putting his hand to his forehead, Hisui painfully struggled with the internal conflict and strong desire to be near the holy maiden, trying to cope with the contradictions in his heart. A lone tree stood majestically in the center of a wide field, where under the clear blue sky its branches seemed to seek peace. Snow-white flowers were hidden in the thick grass like jewels. Peacefully clothed in the clouds, the dragon, leaning against an ancient tree, sat with his eyes closed, immersed either in sleep or in deep thought. Suddenly, the man's train of thought was interrupted when Shitori and Ichiru, using his name and following the subtle scent of his presence, discovered his location. Still silent, the werewolf listened as his friends rejoiced that the place where the former knight was sitting was nearby, and they were able to find him without much difficulty. Finally, raising his voice, the guy asked if the girl was going to find out where he had been all this time, to which the saint replied that she trusted him and that everything Hisui did was for their protection. The wolf cub declared that the dragon should no longer hide from them or tease them, otherwise he would again use his heightened sense of smell to find him and detain him again. After this, the boy added that he and his mistress were very worried about him. After that, the werewolf just looked away and went to rest, leaving their conversation. Futaba deeply realized that for her, her friend occupied a special, important place in her life, and his importance to her was simply invaluable, like a treasure that could not be overestimated. And so her heart did not feel joy when he, despite all the dangers and risks to his own life, desperately tried to protect them, because instead of delight, it was filled with anxiety and fear for his safety. Before the girl could again try to express her feelings and confess her love, Hisui abruptly interrupted her, blocking her voice and not allowing her to say a single word. But the Holy Virgin was not at a loss and kissed the man, filling the moment with warmth and sincerity, which were understandable only to the two of them. All red with shame and emotion, moving away from the guy, Ichiru exclaimed indignantly, demanding to know why he didn't want to listen to her and took away her voice. The werewolf was embarrassed by the saint's insistence, which was completely unusual for him, since he had never previously encountered such an expression of affection and love for himself from another person. The ancient dragon, with a majestic smile on his lips, watched as the maiden fell silent, and said with grace that she was now silent of her own free will. Finally, having made a firm decision, the girl, with an expression of determination on her face, declared that she had fallen in love with Hisui. And this feeling became so obvious and constant to her that she had no choice but to openly admit it. Sitting next to a man under an ancient tree, the saint tenderly asked him to show her the sand that had harmed him. The maiden promised to stay with him wherever he went. Long ago, when he was still a knight, the dragon convinced himself that family was a luxury he could not afford. No one dared to pursue the monster. Covered in sand and exhausted from constant losses, Hisui was tired of the pain and preferred not to get close to anyone anymore to avoid further suffering and disappointment. And so sweet Ichiru appeared on the horizon, whom the dragon did not want to disappoint anymore. She became his love, a source of hope and a light in a dark life. In his real form, almost the entire body of the werewolf was covered with black sand, which penetrated under the skin, causing unbearable pain and leaving traces of its dark shadows on his being. Sparks of magic appeared in the girl's hands, which she directed to heal her lover. Now, thanks to her magic, everything should be fine. Accepting the help of the healer, the guy sincerely apologized to her for hiding the truth about his experiences for a long time. Closing his eyes, Hisui admitted with a deep sigh that Ichiru was so important to him that he could not even imagine how he would cope with the loss. The fear of losing squeezed his heart. Tears of joy flowed down the girl's cheeks, because now there were no more misunderstandings between them. Her soul was filled with warmth and relief, knowing that all the obstacles and misunderstandings were left behind. The loving couple was sitting under a tree when the Holy Virgin, with sincere interest, asked the man if he felt tired after the healing session, showing care and attention to the condition. At this, the young man brought his face closer to the girl, and with a soft but insistent tone, ordered Ichiru not to overwork and not to use his powers too often, warning against unnecessary tension. Their faces were so close that one could feel the intimacy of the moment and feel each other's breathing, filling the space between them with special warmth and understanding. But at that moment, their kiss was interrupted by Shitori, jealously pulling the fabric of the dragon's shirt away from the sweet hostess, as if trying to keep her closeness only for himself. Hisui, in response to this, only patted the boy on the head, praising the boy for his good work and sensitive nose, while showing kind approval and respect. Turning back to the lady, the dragon explained that the Empress would certainly appreciate Ichiru's strength, and if this was the case, then he was also ready to return to the palace and regain his position as a knight. Futaba was over the moon to be able to meet her lover often after moving to the castle. The girl's joy was immeasurable that they could spend time together. Seeing such a funny and cute reaction, Hisui couldn't help the smile that bloomed on his face. The eyes sparkled with sincere pleasure, and the corners of the lips trembled with joy. At home, the couple was already greeted by the fire salamander along with Fuku, who politely welcomed them back, showing warm hospitality and cordiality. Noticing how tired the wolf cub was, Ichiru said that she would return, but before that she wanted to put the boy to bed, showing care and attention to the needs of the beast. Left alone, Hisui called Zirko for a serious conversation. There was silence between them for some time, filled with tension and anticipation of what was to be discussed. The man told his friend that the memories of the top with whom Lead worked had disappeared, and at the moment they no longer pose a threat. Touched to the depths of her soul, the salamander sincerely admitted to her friend that she was very sorry for how long and unfairly she had blamed him for what had happened. The words were full of sincere repentance. When his friend said that he should be punished, Hisui asked with surprise and bewilderment who was going to judge him. Seeing the questioning look, the werewolf explained that he had no intention of commenting on the incident or suing his former colleague. Moreover, Zirko also could not write a report. If the salamander really wanted punishment that badly, Hisui was willing to choose it for the monster himself and carry it out by showing a willingness to take responsibility for the decision. Frightened, but carefully maintaining external calm, the creature closed its eyes, trying not to betray its fear, and decided to accept whatever the dragon came up with. However, instead of pain and suffering, Zirko received only an unpleasant click on the forehead, which, although unexpected, turned out to be far from as severe as he expected. Standing in front of Lead, the werewolf stated with determination that this particular punishment was what he deserved, with full awareness of his guilt and humility. Ichiru's room was lit with a pleasant warm light coming through the windows and creating a cozy atmosphere that brought peace and a feeling of homely warmth. The Holy Maiden herself sat on the bed next to the boy with a look full of compassion, observing his tired state after using magical powers. Smiling, Futaba gently asked the beast to take a comfortable position so that he could rest peacefully and recuperate, regaining his former vigor and energy. The werewolf, unable to calm down after what he saw, burned with jealousy, watching how the mistress was surrounded by the attention and affection of the dragon, which aroused in him deep envy and longing for the tenderness that seemed so inaccessible to him. Sitting down on the bed next to Shitori, Fuku, with a worried look, asked him about his well-being, noticing the boy's strange posture and the expression on his face, full of discomfort. Burying himself in the pillow and trying to avoid the rabbit's gaze, the wolf cub muttered, not too confidently and not entirely convincingly, that everything was in perfect order. However, when the boy raised his head, tears began to flow from his eyes. He loved his mistress so much, while she, on the contrary, was attached to the vile Hisui instead of Shitori. Although Ichiru really didn't want the dragon to die, her little friend couldn't bear the thought of the Holy Maiden crying, which exacerbated his anxiety and sadness. With his ears down, the boy, shocked and depressed, continued to sob. Unable to cope with the painful thought that Futaba would leave anyway and leave him completely alone. Trying to cheer up the werewolf, Fuku reminded him with a smile of how he, with great courage and gratitude, managed to make Ichiru happy and lift her spirits, giving her joy and light in a difficult moment. Diving under the blanket, the boy agreed with the bunny, after which his good friend confirmed the fact that Ichiru loved him as much as Hisui. Moreover, Fuku winked slyly and noted that a lot could change, because when Shitori grows up, she will also be able to compete for the heart of the sweet holy maiden, since their destinies may be intertwined again in the future. These words inspired the little werewolf, and he, nodding to himself, resolutely promised that he would do everything possible to change his fate. As long as the girl was not married, he still had a chance for happiness. At this time, Zirko, with deep sincerity and respect, apologized to the owners of the estate for all the inconvenience caused, admitting that his actions could cause concern and discomfort. Before leaving the premises, the man held out the gemstone in his hand with obvious respect and attention, eager to return it back to clear up the misunderstanding. However, the Holy Virgin refused to take back the magic stone, inviting the sage to keep it for himself. During this time, Ichiru, as before, was busy creating a new magical amulet. A sincerely grateful imperial diplomat expressed his gratitude for saving him and for giving lead, noting how important their generosity was to him. Bowing before the healer, he expressed his deep gratitude to her, pronouncing a blessing and wishing her only the best, as well as success in the noble and important work of the Holy Virgin. Moreover, Zirko will always be happy to help if necessary, be it in managing Hisui or in any other situation where a lady may need support. Standing irritably aside, the evil dragon noticed that he had heard their conversation perfectly well and was clearly not happy with it. Approaching his old friend, the man apologetically said that his former acquaintance had forgotten to take some important things with him, leaving them in his care. In the hand, on which there was a black glove, was placed a mirror, which the diplomat had previously given to the healer. Now the mirror was no longer needed and remained only a reminder of the past. Lead muttered in surprise that they were not obliged to return the mirror at all, since the salamander himself gave it to them as a generous gift, and now it was no longer required back. Hisui, without uttering a word about returning, simply ordered the memory mirror to be returned, demonstrating that the decision was final and not subject to discussion. On the way home, Zirko looked thoughtfully into the mirror, thinking that his reflection should no longer contain any traces of past memories. When the amulet was suddenly opened, a voice was heard from it, which spoke of how terrible it was to speak in front of the public. The same voice sounded disappointed, because they invited the mermaid. In the reflection, one could see how Meilu, overcome with horror, asked Hisui what to do, since she could completely at a loss. Without looking away, the man watched the dragon's memory, in which his beloved clearly appeared, making his heart skip a beat with excitement and nostalgia. Jirko was already beginning to think that this was another mockery on the part of Hisui. But then Meilu, blushing cutely with embarrassment, said that she did not want to go to Lead, fearing that he would find out about her ugly voice. The man froze in place when the scene where the mermaid, in a bewitching voice, ordered the dragon not to reveal a single word from their secret conversation to the salamander resurfaced in his memories. The healer fought until her last breath for the life of the guy she loved. The maiden's body began to turn black, and severe pain appeared, but Meilu did not give up. However, the mermaid's soul will not disappear, but will be reborn in a new body. Even though he and Lead were separated, someday their paths would cross again and they would meet again. Until then, the healer wanted her beloved not to spare words of love, not to close himself off from the world, and to live life to the fullest, experiencing all feelings and emotions. It was with Zirko that the lady spent her happiest and most joyful days, which she will never forget, remembering them as a time filled with smiles and laughter. In the circle of aristocrats, standing at the window, they loudly discussed the news that the dragon was still alive and intact, which caused a wave of surprise and discussion among those present. The noble ladies, on the contrary, could not hide their delight and joy when they learned that they would be able to meet Mr. Hisui, who was incredibly handsome and courageous. The imperial palace, amazed with its beauty and majesty, proudly opening its doors to guests. It was surrounded by dazzling white walls and columns, and blue roofs adorned above. Ichiru and the dragon stood nearby, amazed by the indescribable beauty of the castle. The girl was wearing a cute dress, while the man was wearing a suit worthy of an aristocrat. It finally dawned on Futaba that they had arrived at the palace, and her long-time dream, which seemed almost unattainable, was about to come true. In this moment of realization, her heart filled with joy and excitement. At the entrance, they were greeted by a butler in an impeccably pressed suit, his gestures filled with refined respect. He greeted the couple politely and invited them inside. Inside the palace, walking through a cozy gazebo located near the picturesque green gardens, a woman with blonde hair, dressed in a magnificent outfit. Bowing politely before Her Majesty, Hisui greeted the lady, saying how long it had been since their last meeting. His words were filled with respect before the royal person. Deciding to follow her companion's example, Ichiru also bowed as a sign of respect in front of the woman ruling the country and introduced herself, saying her name. The Empress, seeing an old acquaintance, extended her hand to him in a friendly manner and, calling him her sword, expressed her respect and gratitude. The Empress also treated Ichiru with great cordiality and warmth, deeply recognizing her outstanding abilities and significant achievements, and sincerely looked forward to her long-awaited visit. The three of them comfortably sat down at a snow-white tea table on the veranda and began to excitingly discuss the mysterious magic of the Holy Virgin, plunging into fascinating details. The proud mistress of the land began to list all the virtues of the lady who was able to improve Roslet, healed the animals from the sand and stopped the rain, thereby saving many lives. Smiling and maintaining a calm dignity, Ichiru silently accepted all expressions of praise, modestly bowing his head. Smiling, the woman added that Hisui had grown up in the palace since childhood and was like a son to her, despite the fact that now there was nothing left of the peaceful boy. Now the ruler of the empire, with warmth in her voice and maternal care in her eyes, expressed her sincere desire for the pupil to simply live and enjoy every moment of his life, finding happiness and peace. She also added that as soon as Ichiru's results come back, she will immediately appoint her to the position of healer, recognizing the outstanding abilities of the Holy Maiden. Moreover, in this country, monsters and ordinary people are equal, but magical creatures remain defenseless against the sand rain. Therefore, the Empress's goal was to change their fate and give them freedom. The night came before the saint left the estate, enveloping everything around in soft darkness and bewitching silence. A feeling of anticipation and trepidation before the coming events was in the air. In the silence that enveloped the room like a soft blanket, footsteps suddenly began to be heard, slowly and persistently disturbing the serene peace of the house. To the girl's surprise, she was not the only one who suffered from painful insomnia at this late hour. Hisui stood near the window, bathed in soft moonlight, lost in his thoughts. Smiling with a warm light in her eyes, the healer offered to prepare aromatic herbal tea, which would not only help calm nervous tension, but also have a relaxing effect. As unexpected as it was, the lady found herself firmly in the grip of the dragon's hands, who gently hugged her, as if protecting her from the whole world, and conveyed his warmth and care to her beloved. He gently asked her to stay in this position a little longer to enjoy that brief but priceless moment of closeness and comfort that this moment so generously gave them. Futaba could only nod in agreement, plunging into a deep silence in which embarrassment and shyness enveloped her. The words stuck in my throat, not wanting to come out. After this, the lady made a gentle request to the dragon, asking him to discuss something important with her, since everything in their relationship seemed confused and needed clarity. Smiling, despite her unexpected association with the large reptile, the lady noted that she never doubted her faith in him and always remained confident in his kindness. Holding the saint tightly in his arms, the dragon tenderly and affectionately gave her a kiss that was full of sincere feelings. A real bustle reigned in the palace of the empire. The Empress's subjects were ready to conduct a thorough test of the magic of the Holy Maiden in order to find out the true powers and intentions. The magical test will be carried out by a small dog in an elegant and beautiful outfit. This is a creature with incredible cuteness and fluffiness. Soon, the dog confirmed that Ichiru indeed has the unique power and ability to change the hand, which was a real discovery for everyone present. Futaba sparkled with pride and happiness. Previously, no one had met such a strong person in the field of magic as she, and this realization filled the lady with incredible joy. The only thing they weren't able to pinpoint was Ichiru's power level, as she simply smashed the magic checkball into smithereens. Muttering an apology, the lady felt her face flush with embarrassment. The dog hastened to calm the healer, assuring her that everything was in order. The magic that the saint possessed was a divine gift with which God himself endowed her. For Ichiru to discover that she undoubtedly had some of the essence of magical creatures in her blood, thereby adding an element of magic to her life. Moreover, she also discovered that the attributes of holy magic were mainly possessed by scaly monsters, which was very unusual and unexpected, leaving her completely bewildered and surprised. Sitting on a bench in the garden where red roses bloomed, the girl told her little friend about what had happened. In response, he suggested that perhaps Ichiru was just a fish. According to the boy's logic, since creatures with scales had sacred magic, then the girl was probably a fish. With a smile, the wolf cub added that he himself knew how to swim well. Not far from them there was a picturesque pond, covered with water lilies and sparkling with clear water, to which Shitori headed, trying to observe the mysterious underwater inhabitants. The boy, rushing forward, did not notice how he ran into a tall stranger. The sudden blow made him stagger and, overcoming difficulties, he could barely stay on his feet. This unusual person turned out to be a blond young man with bright blue eyes, who, without hiding his tears, looked like an elf with long and graceful ears, giving him incredible charm. In surprise, the boy stared at the handsome guy, frozen in place, as if spellbound by his extraordinary appearance and grace. Noticing the long absence of the wolf cub, Ichiru, full of deep excitement and anxiety, hurried to meet him, her heart filled with concern for his safety. The elf, with a gentle smile on his face and carefully wiping away tears, said that it was not the girl's fault at all. There was genuine kindness and understanding in the voice. Futaba, deeply shocked by the unexpected meeting with the stranger, could not help but notice his unexpected and truly bewitching attractiveness. In the imperial palace, the aristocrats were stunned by the sudden appearance of the Sword of the Empire, Hisui, at the meeting, which caused many surprised and outraged reactions among those present. The Empress, without wasting any time, decisively stopped all shouts, confidently declaring that this man himself had personally mastered the magic of Ichiru, and therefore had every right to be in the hall. The mistress herself intended to send the Holy Virgin as a student to experienced healers who could teach the ancient arts of healing and pass on valuable knowledge. The noble lady could not help but laugh when she learned from the report that Ichiru, having become so worried during the inspection, accidentally healed the dog who was conducting the assessment. One of the aristocrats, a distinguished middle-aged man with a distinctive mustache, raised his hand and, attracting attention, declared that he had an important and constructive opinion regarding the current situation. According to the report, it was determined that the girl with magical abilities used her skills solely to heal magical creatures and plants affected by the sand. However, according to the nobleman, the maiden could not become a healer, since it was unlikely that she would be able to heal people from serious wounds and injuries. The Empress could not but agree with this opinion, but noted that the Holy Maiden clearly possesses a unique gift that is capable of saving all magical creatures in their region. To summarize, the woman said that if creatures begin to recover faster, then the magical economy will rapidly develop upward, and this, in turn, will lead to an improvement in the situation for people. Hisui listened silently to the speech of the Empress and the old aristocrat. They discussed that it was too early to draw conclusions about the girl's powers, since her abilities were clearly not enough. Moreover, it was because of this terrible noble that Hisui began to be perceived as a monster, which only made the situation worse and added tension to the discussion. Another high society man also raised his hand and muttered awkwardly, pointing out that creating a special place to venerate the Holy Virgin would also require a significant financial investment. And so, one after another, the nobles began to express their dissatisfaction, fearing that the cost of the girl would not justify itself and would not bring the expected return on investment. The men suddenly froze and quickly fell silent when a menacing growl was heard coming from the nearby shadows, which immediately attracted their attention and caused a feeling of alarm. It turned out that it was Hisui who, having lost patience with arrogant egoists focused solely on their own profits and monetary gain, could not stand it and showed his irritation. The dragon stated that he would take it upon himself to protect Ichiru, willing to use all his strength and skills to ensure the girl's safety and well-being. A shiver ran through the aristocrats' bodies, caused by an evil gaze and a clear threat that left no doubt about the intentions of their author, permeating the atmosphere with tension and fear. Hisui indicated that magical beings may begin to doubt if changes do not occur, since they have dedicated their lives to the Empire but have not received appropriate rewards. The men, who found themselves in an extremely awkward position, could not understand what made the dragon, who had previously been completely indifferent to the fate of the country, suddenly begin to show persistent concern and anxiety. Taking into account the opinion of the council and the old ward, the Empress came to the conclusion that the saint should be given a probationary period, after which it would become clear whether his magic would be beneficial or not. According to the woman, the greatest evidence of the effectiveness and usefulness of her magical abilities will be the results achieved and successes that she can demonstrate. It would be extremely interesting to know whether the saint will be able to win the support of the crown prince, that same blonde elf who has a majestic aura and mysterious attractiveness. Ichiru awkwardly watched the guy healer, who, without holding back his emotions, was covered in large tears, as if every glance brought him a new grief or experience. Soon the guy left the room, leaving the girl alone, immersed in her thoughts and feelings. His departure further emphasized her loneliness and inner emptiness. Sitting in the hall, the lady discussed with the dragon what happened at the meeting. The man told her that a period of 3 months had been adopted to test her magical powers. He also added that during this time she will receive both material and non-material support, which may be necessary to successfully fulfill all the requirements of the Empire. Smiling, Ichiru accepted all the conditions, feeling that she had finally achieved her desired goal. The lady's heart was full of joy and satisfaction, knowing that her efforts were not in vain. The dragon thought that in order to achieve complete success, they should also enlist the support of the heir in order to strengthen their position and provide a reliable foundation for future endeavors. Surprised, the girl froze at the mention of the heir. The violet eyes widened in shock, and the saint had a hard time realizing that she had never heard of the existence of such a person before. Quickly comprehending the information she had just heard, the girl came to the surprising conclusion that the prince in question was a healer just like herself. However, the prince's magical abilities became weaker every day, and there were rumors that yesterday the guy was unable to use his power on his own, which made the situation even worse. Hastening to explain, Hisui explained that the prince was half human and that he could have been infected by the black sand that fell from him, which explained his depressed state and deteriorating abilities. Ichiru nodded in understanding as she realized that she had a chance to try to help the prince and cure him from the ravages of the black sand. Not only the guy's health, but also the prosperity of the entire empire depended on this. The hedgehog who came to Ichiru introduced herself as a maid and said that her name was Hari Perk, adding that she would help the saint within these walls, offering all her strength and knowledge to successfully complete the assigned tasks. With joy, the Holy Virgin asked the hedgehog to take care of her, to which she replied that today she would show her the palace and introduce her to its surroundings in order to help her better adapt. When the lady went out into the street with the maid, her gaze immediately fell on the crowd of people gathered nearby, among whom she noticed several familiar faces. The dragon stood in the middle of the territory in a white shirt, confident in himself and his actions. His posture and calmness indicated his readiness to repel any threat. Now Hisui was going to become the healer's personal bodyguard, and so, while he had free time, he replaced the instructor in the training of the Order of Knights, using his wealth of experience in battles to train. A little later, a ceremony was to take place at which the man would be knighted, which would be an important step in his career path and recognition of his merits and experience in martial arts. At this moment, the dragon, as if sensing Ichiru's presence, suddenly turned and looked at her with a warm and sincere smile. The expression on the guy's face conveyed joy and friendliness. The holy maiden felt her heart beat faster with excitement, and her face turned red like a ripe tomato, giving her image a reverent and tender shade, filled with invisible magic and emotional depth. Futaba happily waved her hand, greeting her lover. Her face shone with sincere happiness, and real deep affection sparkled in her eyes. The embarrassed dragon returned to training the knights, who were surprised by such strange behavior of their commander, not knowing what exactly caused his awkwardness. Ichiru, in a modest dress accompanied by a hedgehog, strolled through the luxurious halls of the imperial palace, where maids walked back and forth, going about their business. Suddenly, 2 knights approached the lady, introducing themselves as sages who had joined the knightly order at the same time as Hisui. making their visit especially significant. One of the palace's defenders reported that they had heard rumors of a healer who had saved the lord, and this news was at the center of discussion among the guards. It may have seemed rude of them, but the sages could not resist asking directly, and inquired whether the healer had met Hisui, showing genuine interest in her interaction with the commander. Achiru immediately felt deep embarrassment from such a frank and unexpected question. Her face turned red, and her eyes sparkled with awkwardness and confusion, causing her to become confused for a moment. The dragon was known for his hostility and cold gaze that pierced through. It was incredibly difficult to get close to him because his heart seemed made of ice. This was very different from that smiling captain, whose face lit up with joy and light whenever he looked at his beloved, radiating such warmth and happiness, as if the whole world around was becoming brighter and kinder. Under Ichiru's clumsy gaze, the men became sad that their colleague had become a real handsome man, although they thought that they themselves would be popular with women and he would remain a bachelor. Futaba herself could not understand how miraculously she managed to melt the cold heart of a man who was known for his inaccessibility. The Holy Virgin only followed the call of her heart, hoping for the best. When she was asked if she was the dragon's lover, Futaba could not answer this question, since the girl herself did not know the exact answer, being lost in her feelings and guesses. While the saint was settling into a new place, a new day dawned, and the aristocrats leisurely strolled through the spacious halls, decorated with exquisite fabrics and shiny crystal chandeliers. Dressed in a gorgeous pink formal dress, Ichiru stood awkwardly among the sophisticated ladies, lamenting the missed opportunity and regretting that she never got to talk to Hisui. In his fantasies, the orphan dragon refused her with reluctance and bewilderment, assuring that he could never even think about something like this, so far from his ideas about peace and honor. If he answers like that, the girl's heart will be broken, like fragile glass falling on a stone floor. Trying to calm down, Futaba mused that perhaps this level of affection between friends was indeed normal among dragons. The lady's fingers curled nervously, reflecting the girl's desire to become noticeable and important to Hisui, trying to attract his attention and arouse his interest. Suddenly, a loud voice called out for the great lord to come out, followed by powerful echoing footsteps, filling the air with tense anticipation. And then, Hisui entered the hall, dressed in the ceremonial uniform of the imperial court, which resembled a magnificent prince from fairy tales, captivating everyone with his royal grandeur and grace. In person, he was much more handsome than the healer could have imagined in her wildest fantasies. His aristocratic appearance, combining sophisticated elegance and impeccable style, seemed almost unreal. The man knelt down in front of the empress and, listening to her royal gaze, began to pronounce the oath of allegiance in a firm voice. He swore with his honor, faith, and truth to serve the empire, promising to give his life for its prosperity and protection, sparing neither strength nor energy for the well-being of the country.